What would you do if you stumbled upon a grave with no name, no date, and no story, just silent stones standing guard over secrets thousands of years old? All around our world, hidden in plain sight or buried deep beneath the earth, lie the final resting places of people whose lives and cultures have been completely erased from history. These aren't just tombs, they are time capsules left behind by civilizations we can no longer hear, architectural marvels constructed with a purpose we can only guess at. Each one is a locked door, and we've lost the key. The sheer mystery of not knowing who built them or why they went to such incredible lengths pulls at a fundamental human curiosity, the need to solve the puzzle, to put a name to the face, to understand the story that has been waiting patiently for someone to listen. It's a feeling that connects us directly to the explorers and archaeologists of the past, that shared thrill of standing on the brink of a discovery that could rewrite everything we thought we knew. Today, we're embarking on a journey to 30 of these enigmatic sites. We'll walk through towering megalithic chambers erected by cultures whose very names are lost to time. We'll peer into sarcophagi carved with symbols no modern linguist can fully translate. We will see burials that defy the technological understanding of their era, interments so lavish and complex they hint at wealth and power on a scale that challenges our historical timeline. This is not a simple catalogue of old graves. This is an exploration of the gaps in our collective memory, a tour through the blank spots on the map of human history. These sites are questions carved in stone and bone, and they challenge us to look closer, to think deeper, and to wonder what incredible narratives are still hidden, just waiting for the right clue to bring them back into the light. So prepare to venture to the very edges of the known world and beyond. From the windswept highlands of Scotland to the dense jungles of Central America, from the deserts of Egypt to the islands of the Pacific, we will uncover stories etched not in books but in the earth itself. Every grave holds a secret, and every skeleton has a story to tell, a story of love, of loss, of belief, or of a terror so great it demanded a burial meant to last for eternity. This is a journey into the heart of historical mystery, and what we find there might just change the way you see the ancient world forever. Our journey into the unknown begins not in some distant, forgotten land, but right here in North America, within the dry, dusty confines of Lovelock Cave in Nevada. In the early 20th century, guano miners digging for fertilizer burst into a sealed cavern and found themselves face to face with a scene that defied explanation. They weren't just unearthing ancient tools or pottery. They were pulling massive skeletal remains from the earth, skeletons reported to be between 7 and 8 feet tall, some even larger, with skulls that were notably elongated and, according to some accounts, still clinging to traces of reddish hair. This was the stuff of pure legend, quite literally brought to life. For the local Paiute people, this was no surprise. Their oral history had spoken for generations of the Xi'an, a fearsome tribe of red-haired cannibal giants who once inhabited the region. According to their stories, these giants were so formidable that a coalition of tribes finally cornered the last of them in this very cave, ending their reign of terror. The discovery in Lovelock Cave seemed to be a stunning, tangible validation of a story passed down for centuries. The initial excavations, particularly those by archaeologists like Llewellyn Laud in the early 1910s, appeared to support these astounding claims. They recovered not only these controversial giant bones but also a wealth of astonishing artifacts, intricate duck decoys crafted from reeds and feathers, sophisticated fishing gear, and a trove of everyday objects that painted a picture of a complex society. But here is where the mystery deepens and the controversy truly ignites. Much of the most compelling skeletal evidence, the so-called giant bones, has since been lost, misplaced, or was even reportedly ground up for fertilizer by the very miners who found them. This lack of definitive physical proof has allowed mainstream archaeology to largely dismiss the giant narrative. skeptics propose that the remains were likely those of tall, but not supernaturally giant, individuals from known Native American groups, and that the stories of their immense size have been exaggerated over time, a classic case of legend overtaking fact. Yet the evidence that remains is strangely compelling. The artifacts themselves are undeniable proof of a sophisticated prehistoric culture that used this cave for thousands of years. And the persistence of the Paiute oral tradition cannot be so easily brushed aside. These are not mere campfire tales. They are detailed historical accounts preserved by a culture with a deep and enduring connection to the land. The question then becomes, what is the true story of Lovelock Cave? Was it the final tomb of a forgotten race of giants, a legend made flesh and bone? Or is it a powerful example of how archaeology and mythology can become intertwined, where a kernel of truth, perhaps a conflict with an unusually tall and distinct-looking tribe, was woven over centuries into an epic story of giants? The cave itself offers no easy answers, standing as a silent, enigmatic monument to a past that continues to challenge our understanding of the ancient American landscape. Leaving the dry caves of Nevada behind, our search for answers takes us across the Atlantic to the sun-baked, windswept island of Sardinia, where an entirely different kind of mystery stands in silent testimony to a lost people. Scattered across the rugged landscape are the Tombe dei Giganti, the tombs of the giants. The name itself fires the imagination, and the sight of these structures does not disappoint. They are not simple mounds of earth or piles of stone. They are architectural marvels built with a profound sense of ceremony and scale. At first glance, you see a long, low, boat-shaped mound of earth and stone, sometimes stretching over 100 feet in length. But it is the entrance that is truly arresting, a colossal, central stone stele, often expertly carved and soaring to heights of 10 feet or more, seamlessly fitted into the facade. This massive slab is flanked by a series of curved stone arms that reach out to form a vast, semicircular forecourt, an arena-like space that feels designed not for private mourning but for public, communal gathering. These imposing structures were the work of the Nuragic civilization, a people who flourished on Sardinia for centuries, from the Bronze Age well into the Iron Age. They are best known for the distinctive nuraghi, the conical, tower-like fortresses that dot the island, but the giants' tombs are arguably an even greater enigma. We know the Nuragic people were skilled metallurgists, traders across the Mediterranean, and formidable builders, yet they left behind no deciphered written records. Their entire worldview, their beliefs about life and death, must be pieced together solely from the stones they left behind. This forces us to ask, why did they invest such immense labor and architectural genius into their tombs? Was it merely a practical need to inter the dead, or was it something far more profound? The theories about the tomb's primary purpose are as varied as they are compelling. One prevailing idea is that these were elite burial chambers, the final resting places for chieftains, priests, or royal families. The sheer effort required to quarry, transport, and erect the central stele certainly suggests a tribute to someone of immense importance. However, excavations have often revealed the remains of multiple individuals within a single tomb, sometimes dozens, pointing instead to a communal function. This wasn't just a grave for a single leader, it was an ancestral vault for an entire clan or community, a physical link to their collective forebears. The presence of the forecourt adds another layer of complexity. This space was almost certainly used for ritual ceremonies to honor the dead, perhaps to communicate with ancestors, or to perform rites that guaranteed the fertility of the land or the prosperity of the people. The architecture itself guides you into this sacred space, funneling you toward the central stele, which many researchers believe acted not just as a door, but as a symbolic portal between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The most captivating mystery of all is the meaning behind the central stele's distinctive carving. Many of these massive stones feature a small, carved band near the top, framing a recessed doorway or a simple slit. Some archaeologists interpret this as a representation of a doorway to the afterlife, a passageway for the soul. Others see it as a powerful symbol of a deity, perhaps a mother goddess or a bull god, both of which feature in other Neuragic art. The true meaning is lost, a silent symbol waiting for its translator. Unlike the legend-rich Lovelock Cave, the giants' tombs offer no oral history to guide us. The Neuragic people and their language vanished, absorbed by later civilizations. We are left with only the silent, stoic stones, their grand forecourts now empty of chanting priests and gathered clans. They stand as majestic, heartbreakingly beautiful monuments to a people who desperately wanted to be remembered, who built for eternity, but who took the intimate knowledge of their own rituals and beliefs with them to their graves. From the monumental, ceremonial tombs of Sardinia, we travel back in time to a stark and sobering landscape along the Nile River in what is now northern Sudan. Here, at a site known as Jebel Sahaba, we find a cemetery that chills the bone not with grand architecture, but with brutal, intimate testimony. Discovered in the 1960s and dated to an astonishing 13,000 years ago, this is one of the oldest organized burial grounds ever found on our planet. It is a place that should speak of the earliest roots of community and ritual, but instead it tells a story written in bone and flint. The people buried here were not laid to rest peacefully after long lives. Of the 61 individuals carefully excavated, nearly half showed clear, unhealed signs of violent trauma. This isn't the occasional evidence of a hunting accident or a personal dispute. The remains bear the marks of a horrific, coordinated attack. Many skeletons have the telltale lesions of projectile wounds, with sharp stone microblades still embedded in the bones, and others show fractures from close-quarter bludgeoning. This was not a skirmish, it was a massacre, making Jebel Sahaba the earliest scientifically documented evidence of large-scale, organized violence between human groups. Who were these people, and what circumstances could have driven such a devastating conflict? The prevailing theory identifies them as hunter-gatherers, part of what archaeologists call the Cadden culture, who thrived along the Nile during the late Pleistocene. At this time, the world was emerging from the last ice age, and the climate of North Africa was undergoing a dramatic and punishing transformation. The once lush, green savannas that had supported abundant game were beginning to recede, giving way to the expanding Sahara Desert. Resources that were once plentiful water, fertile land, and animals to hunt were becoming concentrated and scarce, especially along the life-giving corridor of the Nile. This environmental stress is the most compelling backdrop for the tragedy at Jebel Sahaba. It paints a picture of competing groups of humans, their traditional territories drying up around them, being forced into closer and closer proximity along the river. In this pressure cooker of survival, a territorial dispute over a critical fishing spot or a hunting ground could have escalated into the kind of brutal, intercommunal violence etched into these skeletons. This site fundamentally challenges a long-held, almost romanticized view of early hunter-gatherer societies as inherently peaceful, small bands living in harmonious equilibrium with their environment and each other. Jebel Sahaba forces us to confront a more complex and uncomfortable reality. It suggests that the roots of organized human warfare run much deeper than we once believed, predating the invention of agriculture, permanent settlements, and the accumulation of material wealth that we often associate with conflict. The weapons used were not sophisticated. They were the very same tools used for hunting and daily survival, spears tipped with finely crafted stone points. This indicates a terrifying adaptability, the human capacity to turn the technology of life against itself. The violence was also shockingly personal. The pattern of injuries, including defensive wounds on arms and hands, and the fact that men, women, and even adolescents were among the victims, points to a face-to-face confrontation of terrifying intensity. It was likely a raid, an ambush, a brutal event that shattered a community in a single bloody day. Yet, even amidst this horror, there is a poignant counter-narrative that speaks to the enduring humanity of these people. The fact that the victims were carefully buried in a designated cemetery is profoundly significant. Their community, or the survivors of it, took the time and effort to collect their dead and inter them with a sense of ritual and respect. This act tells us that these were not just faceless combatants in a prehistoric war. They were individuals who were loved and mourned. They were fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. Their burial is a silent testament to the bonds of kinship and community that persisted even after an unimaginable trauma. Jebel Sahaba thus stands as a deeply dualistic monument. It is both the earliest known battlefield and a sacred resting place. It reminds us that the human capacity for violence and the profound need for compassion, ritual, and connection have existed side by side for millennia, a fundamental part of our story since the very dawn of our history. As we move from the sun-scorched shores of the ancient Nile, we find ourselves in a landscape so hostile and remote it seems to defy human existence entirely, the Taklamakan Desert in western China. This is one of the most arid places on Earth, a vast sea of shifting sand dunes where the very air seems to suck the moisture from your lungs. Yet it was here, in the parched, salty soil of the Tarim Basin, that archaeologists made one of the most disorienting discoveries of the 20th century. They began to unearth bodies, but these were not mere skeletons. The incredible dryness and salty soil had naturally mummified them, preserving not just bone, but skin, hair, clothing, and even facial expressions in an astonishing state. The first sight of one of these mummies is a moment of profound cognitive dissonance. Lying in the heart of Asia, wrapped in beautifully woven woolen textiles and often wearing tall, pointed felt hats, are individuals with strikingly European features, long noses, deep-set eyes, red or blonde hair, and fair skin. They look as if they could have walked straight out of a Celtic village or a Scandinavian fjord, yet they were buried in China millennia before the Silk Road would formally connect east and west. The clothing and artifacts buried with them only deepen the mystery. These were not primitive nomads. Their textiles are sophisticated, featuring intricate woven plaids that bear a remarkable resemblance to Celtic tartans. They wore tailored woolen pants, colorful skirts, and ornate felt boots, their style speaking of a cold weather culture adept at animal husbandry and weaving. They were buried with small baskets of grain, perhaps for their journey to the afterlife, and some were found with wheels and wooden fixtures from what were likely ceremonial carts or chariots. The most famous of these individuals, known as the Beauty of Lulan, is a woman who died nearly 4,000 years ago, her delicate features and long, flaxen hair preserved with an almost ethereal clarity. Another, the Chechen man, sports a magnificent red beard and a felt hat, looking for all the world like a Bronze Age chieftain from Central Europe. The immediate, unavoidable question is how these people, so physically distinct from the East Asian populations that have dominated the region for centuries, came to be here at such an early date. This is where modern science has stepped in to try to solve a puzzle that archaeology alone could not crack. For decades, theories swirled. Were they lost travelers? A mercenary band that had strayed too far? The results of advanced genetic testing, however, have provided a stunningly clear yet complex answer. DNA analysis confirms that these Tarim Basin mummies were not merely distant cousins of Europeans. They were a deeply isolated, direct descendant population of an ancient group known as the Ancient North Eurasians. This same ancestral group contributed heavily to the genetics of indigenous Siberians and later to the peoples who migrated into Europe and the Americas. The incredible revelation is that this particular branch seems to have split off and journeyed deep into Inner Asia, becoming genetically isolated before they ever arrived in the Tarim Basin. They were not recent migrants from the West. They were an ancient people who had likely been living in the heart of Asia for thousands of years, a relic population preserving a very old, distinctive genetic signature. So how do we reconcile their Western appearance with their ancient presence in China? The prevailing hypothesis points to the vast migrations of early Indo-European speakers, a group of related peoples who, over millennia, spread out from a probable homeland in the Eurasian steppes. One branch of these people, known as the Tocharians, are known to have later lived in this very region and spoke an Indo-European language. The Tarim mummies are now widely believed to be the ancestors of these Tocharians, representing the vanguard of that incredible early eastward expansion. They were not lost, they were pioneers, settling in the oases around the Taklamakan Desert and developing a unique, vibrant culture that thrived in near-total isolation for centuries. Their presence shatters the traditional narrative of ancient China as a purely insular civilization, revealing that the crossroads of Eurasia were bustling with diverse peoples far earlier than anyone had imagined. These well-dressed, fair-haired people were not ghosts or anomalies. They were a foundational piece of Central Asia's human tapestry, their silent, preserved forms standing as a powerful testament to the astonishing distances our ancestors traveled and the forgotten worlds that lie buried just beneath the sand. From the desolate dunes of the Taklamakan, our journey takes us to the very heart of ancient China, to a tomb that overshadows even the most extravagant burials we have encountered so far. While millions of tourists flock to Xi'an to marvel at the terracotta army, those thousands of silent, life-sized soldiers are merely the outer guardians, the protective force for a secret that lies buried deep within a massive, man-made mountain just 1 mile away. This is the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, a man so obsessed with immortality and power that his final resting place was designed as a literal underground empire for him to rule in the afterlife. The sprawling mausoleum complex is a city of the dead, but its core, the emperor's own pyramid-shaped burial mound, remains one of the most tantalizing and deliberately unopened archaeological sites on Earth. Our most detailed and equally controversial account of what lies inside comes from the Great Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, writing about a century after the emperor's death. His descriptions read less like a dry historical record and more like the blueprint for a mythic underworld. He recounts that teams of 700,000 conscripted laborers hollowed out the earth to build a sprawling subterranean palace, its ceiling inlaid with pearls to simulate the stars of the night sky and its floor carved with a map of the emperor's unified realm. The geography of this underground China was rendered in breathtaking detail, with its great rivers and oceans represented not by carvings but by flowing mercury, mechanically circulated to never cease their motion. This vast quicksilver landscape was populated by all the wonders of the world, rare artifacts, priceless jewels, and presumably all the comforts a god-king would require for eternity. And to ensure his eternal solitude was never disturbed, the chronicles describe cunningly designed booby traps, crossbows rigged to automatically fire at any intruder who dared to breach the sealed passageways. For 2,000 years, these accounts were viewed by many as fanciful legend, an exaggerated folk tale born from the emperor's formidable reputation. Yet, modern science has begun to cast a startling new light on these ancient stories, lending them an air of chilling credibility. Beginning in the 1980s, Chinese archaeologists conducted extensive scientific surveys of the soil around the massive, vegetation-covered burial mound. Using remote sensing technology and taking core samples, they made a stunning discovery. The soil in the immediate vicinity of the tomb contains mercury concentrations dramatically higher than those in the surrounding area in some places, up to 100 times the normal level. This is not a vague trace element, it is a significant, localized anomaly that aligns perfectly with Sima Qian's description of mercury rivers coursing through the burial chamber. The presence of such high levels of a toxic, rare, and expensive substance strongly suggests that the ancient historian's account was based on more than just rumor and speculation. It implies that the core of his incredible story is true, that deep within that earthen pyramid lies a toxic, metallic sea, a dangerous and mesmerizing monument to one man's ultimate power. This scientific validation, however, has not prompted a rush to excavate. On the contrary, it is a primary reason the Chinese government and archaeological community have steadfastly refused to open the main tomb. The concerns are multi-layered and deeply compelling. First and foremost is the immense physical danger. Mercury is an extremely potent neurotoxin, and breaching a chamber that has contained volatile liquid mercury for over 2 millennia could release deadly vapors, posing an unacceptable risk to any excavation team. Then there are the legendary booby traps. While 2,000-year-old mechanical crossbows may seem like a relic from an adventure movie, the principle remains. The tomb was designed to be deadly, and no one can be certain what ingenious, preserved mechanisms might still be functional. Beyond the immediate physical perils, there are profound archaeological risks. The science of preservation is still evolving, and the fear of a repeat of past disasters, like the rapid discoloration and disintegration of artifacts that occurred when the terracotta warriors were first exposed to air, looms large. The potential for irretrievably damaging priceless silks, wooden artifacts, or even the emperor's own remains by exposing them to the modern environment is a gamble many are unwilling to take. Intertwined with these scientific cautions are powerful cultural and philosophical considerations. In China, there is a long-standing tradition of showing respect for the dead, particularly for ancient emperors who are viewed as foundational figures in the nation's history. To deliberately disturb the tomb of the first emperor is not a decision taken lightly. It is seen by many as a potentially disrespectful act, a violation of a sacred space. There is also a more philosophical argument for leaving some mysteries unsolved. The unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang represents the ultimate cliffhanger in human history, a sealed capsule containing answers to countless questions about the Qin dynasty's technology, art, and cosmology. By choosing not to open it, we preserve that sense of wonder and possibility. We acknowledge that some secrets are too grand, too perilous, or too sacred to be uncovered. For now, the emperor rests within his toxic, mercurial kingdom, guarded by his clay army and protected by the very weight of history and caution. His pyramid mound standing as a silent green hill that holds one of the greatest untold stories of the ancient world. Just when we thought the burial traditions of ancient Britain were becoming familiar, the coastline itself decided to reveal a secret that defied all expectations. In 1998, after shifting sands and severe storms eroded a beach at Holme-next the Sea in Norfolk, a site emerged that had been hidden for over 4,000 years. Locals and archaeologists were stunned to find a perfect, haunting circle of 55 closely packed oak posts encircling a massive, upside-down oak tree stump, its roots reaching dramatically toward the sky. This was Xi'an, a timber monument as spiritually potent and enigmatic as its famous stone counterpart, Stonehenge, yet constructed in a completely different way and for a purpose that seems even more intimate and mysterious. But the story doesn't end with this one circle. Just a short distance away, another larger ring was discovered, named Home II. This second circle was different. It was not an empty platform but contained a central mound that was likely a burial barrow, making it the final resting place for someone of immense importance, though who that person was remains one of prehistoric Britain's most compelling questions. The construction of Xi'an itself was a masterwork of Bronze Age engineering and symbolism. The central feature was not a standing stone, but a colossal, inverted oak tree, estimated to have been over 400 years old when it was felled. Turning this ancient giant upside down and positioning it at the heart of the circle was a deliberate, powerful act. The surrounding palisade of sharpened oak posts, each one split from a single massive tree trunk, was erected with the bark facing deliberately inward, creating a closed, private space. This was not a monument built for public spectacle. It was a deeply secluded arena hidden from the outside world. The precision of its creation is underscored by an incredible scientific discovery. Using dendrochronology, the science of tree ring dating, researchers were able to analyze the growth rings in the timber and pinpoint the exact year the trees were cut down, 2049 BC. Even more astonishing, they could determine the season the tools used to shape the wood left marks, showing the trees were felled in the spring, suggesting the monument's construction was tied to a specific, and likely very significant, seasonal event or spiritual deadline. So, what was the purpose of this strange, secluded timber circle with its upside-down tree? The most widely accepted theory is that it served as a mortuary platform for a practice known as excarnation or sky burial. In this interpretation, the inverted oak trunk with its sprawling roots exposed to the elements acted as a natural table. A body would be placed upon it, elevated and enclosed within the sacred circle, and then left to the mercy of the coastal birds and the elements. The purpose was not disrespect, but quite the opposite. By allowing the flesh to be cleansed from the bones by carrion birds, the community believed they were releasing the spirit from its earthly vessel, offering it directly to the heavens and the gods of the sky. The enclosed nature of the circle would have protected this sacred and likely gruesome process from casual view, making it a private ritual for priests or elders. This theory transforms Stonehenge from a simple monument into a dramatic machine for the soul's transition, a place where death was not an end, but a physical and spiritual transformation witnessed only by the sacred circle and the open sky. However, the presence of the second circle, Home the Second, complicates the story and introduces the tantalizing possibility of a noble burial. This adjacent site was larger and featured two concentric timber rings surrounding what appears to have been a central burial mound. Unlike the potentially functional platform of Stonehenge, Home II has all the hallmarks of a high-status grave, a barrow built to mark the final resting place of a paramount chieftain, a revered spiritual leader, or perhaps even a founding ancestor of a tribe. The two circles were undoubtedly connected, built at the same time from timbers sourced from the same ancient forest. This leads to a captivating narrative. What if the individual whose body was laid out for excarnation within Stonehenge was the very same person who was then buried with honor in the barrow at Home II? The ritual in the first circle would have purified the bones, and then those clean, venerated remains could have been interred just a few feet away in a grand, permanent tomb. This two-stage process would represent one of the most complex and sophisticated funerary rituals known from Bronze Age Europe. Yet, with all this architectural evidence, the core mystery remains utterly intact. We have the tomb, but we have no idea who was inside it. The acidic sand and saltwater environment has long since dissolved any skeletal remains, leaving no DNA, no physical clues to their identity, age, or gender. The person or persons buried here have vanished completely, leaving only the ghost of their importance impressed upon the landscape. Why was this specific coastal location chosen? Was this individual a leader who died at sea, making the shoreline a spiritually significant threshold? Were they a traveler from a distant land, buried in a way that blended local traditions with their own? Or was this the grave of someone who unified local tribes, whose death was so significant it demanded a monument that broke all conventions? The inverted tree, the hidden circle, the adjacent barrow, every piece of this puzzle points to a person of extraordinary significance, a figure whose name and story are now whispered only by the wind and the waves, their legacy reduced to a circle of weathered stumps on a lonely beach, a silent sentinel to a life once so grand it commanded the very oaks of the forest to mark its passing. But our exploration of ancient burial rites now takes a dramatic turn from the windswept beaches of Britain to the humid, secluded mountain caves of the Philippines, where an entirely different kind of preservation tells a story of cultural mastery and profound loss. High in the Cordillera Mountains of Luzon, in the town of Cagayan, lies a network of caves that serve as the final resting place for the Ibeloy people's most revered ancestors, the fire mummies. To encounter one of these mummies is to come face to face with a figure from the distant past, their skin stretched taut and darkened to a leathery sheen, their bodies often positioned in a fetal pose as if awaiting a rebirth. Unlike the natural mummies of the Taklamakan, preserved by a dry climate, or the bog bodies of northern Europe, preserved by acidic peat, the Cabaean mummies are the result of a deliberate, intricate, and incredibly grueling artificial process, a ritual of preservation that began not after death, but in the final days of a person's life. The mummification process itself was a testament to the Ibeloy's deep understanding of anatomy and their natural environment, a procedure so complex it was reserved only for the community's wealthiest and most elite members, the village leaders, the wealthy landowners, and the revered spiritual elders. The journey to becoming a mummy started when an individual felt death approaching. They would begin by drinking a highly concentrated solution of salt water, a painful act that initiated the dehydration process from the inside out. As the person neared the very end, they would be placed in a seated position directly above a carefully controlled smoldering fire. The heat was not intense enough to burn the flesh, but instead served to slowly and methodically dry the body, with relatives taking turns to continuously turn the corpse over many days to ensure even desiccation. Once the majority of the bodily fluids had been evaporated by this low heat, the next phase began. The body was then thoroughly smoked, a process that could take weeks or even months, where it was treated with the smoke from local herbs and tobacco. This smoking acted as a powerful insecticide and antimicrobial agent, further preventing decay and protecting the remains from the pests of the tropical climate. The final result was a perfectly preserved, lightweight body, ready to be ceremonially bound and carried to its eternal home in the mountain caves. This incredible tradition, however, did not last. By the time Spanish colonizers and later American missionaries arrived in the region in force during the 19th and early 20th centuries, the practice had already begun to wane. The most profound mystery surrounding the Cabaean mummies is not how they were made, but why this deeply embedded and sophisticated cultural practice eventually vanished entirely, taking its specialized knowledge with it. Several factors likely contributed to its cessation. The arrival of Western colonizers brought with it new religions, primarily Catholicism and Protestantism, which often discouraged or outright banned such indigenous rituals, branding them as pagan or sacrilegious. Along with new faiths came new diseases which devastated local populations and likely disrupted the careful, time-intensive process that required a stable community and the guidance of skilled elders. Furthermore, the Spanish colonial administration imposed taxes that had to be paid in cash, forcing many Ibeloy to leave their ancestral lands to find work, breaking the chain of cultural transmission from one generation to the next. The knowledge of the exact herbal mixtures, the precise control of the fire's temperature, and the sacred songs that were likely sung during the process died with the last practitioners, leaving behind the physical mummies but erasing the living context that gave them meaning. Today, the descendants of the Ibeloy face a heartbreaking challenge, protecting these ancestral remains from both human and natural threats. The very seclusion that once protected the cave burials now makes them vulnerable. Looters seeking to profit from the illicit antiquities trade have broken into caves, decapitating mummies to steal their skulls and scattering irreplaceable artifacts. Perhaps an even more insidious threat is the slow, steady work of the elements. Climate change has begun to alter the delicate microclimates within the caves, with increased humidity and fluctuating temperatures promoting the growth of mold and fungi that gradually consume the mummies' preserved tissues. Conservation efforts are a race against time, involving local communities, anthropologists, and the Philippine government. These initiatives range from installing iron gates to secure cave entrances to meticulously monitoring the environmental conditions inside the tombs. For the Ibeloy people, this is not merely an archaeological preservation project. It is an act of profound cultural respect. The mummies are not artifacts or exhibits to them, they are their ancestors, known as a po, a term of reverence for elders. Their ongoing struggle is to safeguard these silent, seated figures, the last physical link to a unique and brilliant tradition of life after death, ensuring that even if the rituals are forgotten, the people they honored are not. Our journey now takes us from the caves of the Philippines to the arid coastal plains of northern Peru, where another incredible discovery lay hidden for 1,700 years beneath a crumbling, sun-baked mud brick pyramid. In 1987, near the modern town of Lambayeque, Peruvian archaeologist Walter Alva faced a race against time. Looters, known as huaqueros, had already begun to plunder a site called Huaca Rojada, and Alva's team was initially called in to investigate the damage. What they found was a looter's tunnel that had narrowly missed a hidden chamber, and what began as a salvage operation quickly exploded into one of the most spectacular archaeological finds of the 20th century. As they carefully excavated deeper, they broke through into an intact royal tomb, a burial so opulent and complete that it was immediately hailed as the New World's equivalent of Tutankhamun's tomb. This was the final resting place of a Moch ruler, now known as the Lord of Sipon. The sheer wealth and artistry contained within that single chamber was staggering. The Lord himself was found lying in a wooden coffin that had long since decayed, but his regalia remained, telling a vivid story of his power and status. His body was adorned from head to toe in symbols of authority. He wore a magnificent funerary mask made of gold, and his head was crowned with a huge, crescent-shaped headdress made of gold and silver, resembling a spectacular headdress of a warrior priest. His neck was covered with multiple necklaces of solid gold beads, each one shaped like peanuts, a sacred crop for the Moch. His wrists were clad with protective bands made of gold and silver, and his hands held a solid gold scepter and a silver one crossed over his chest. But perhaps the most telling items were the intricate ear spools, large circular ornaments that stretched his earlobes, depicting intricate scenes of ritual combat. Every single piece was a masterpiece of metallurgy, demonstrating the Moch's incredible skill in working gold, silver, and copper, often using complex techniques like electrochemical plating that were not thought to exist in the ancient Americas. Yet the tomb revealed far more than just one man's wealth. It exposed the intricate and often brutal hierarchy of Moch society. The Lord of Sipon was not buried alone. Surrounding his main coffin were the skeletons of several other individuals, all laid to rest with him to accompany him into the afterlife. These included a military commander, still wearing his own copper armor and headdress. There was a flag bearer positioned as if holding a standard. There were 3 young women, likely wives or concubines, dressed in fine ceremonial clothing. A child of about 9 or 10 years was also present, possibly a page, and completing this grim retinue were the remains of a guard whose feet had been amputated, perhaps to ensure he would never leave his post, and several llamas, presumably sacrificed to provide food for the journey. This collective burial paints a chilling picture of a society with a rigid social structure, where a ruler's power extended even beyond death, commanding the very lives of his closest companions to serve him for eternity. So who was this man who commanded such devotion and wealth? The artifacts point overwhelmingly to him being a figure known as the sacerdote guerrero, or the warrior priest. Moch art, famously depicted on their intricate ceramic vessels and temple murals, often shows a central figure who is both a military leader and a religious officiant, presiding over a ceremony known as the sacrifice ceremony. In this ritual, defeated combatants were sacrificed, and their blood was offered to the gods to ensure fertility and the continuation of the world. The Lord of Sipon's regalia matches this iconography perfectly. His crescent headdress, his octagonal scepter, and the specific symbols on his ear spools are all items shown in these ritual scenes. This suggests he was not just a political ruler, but the highest religious authority in his realm, a man who could lead his people in battle and then perform the most sacred of rites to maintain the cosmic order. His burial is the first physical proof that these powerful, semi-divine figures from Moche art were real people who wielded immense temporal and spiritual power. The discovery of this and subsequent tombs at xi'an provided an unprecedented window into the Moche, a civilization that dominated the north coast of Peru from about 100 to 800 AD. They were master engineers, building vast irrigation canals to farm the desert, and brilliant artists, producing some of the most expressive pottery and metalwork ever seen in the Americas. Yet, for all their sophistication, the Moche civilization experienced a sudden and dramatic collapse around the end of the 8th century, their great ceremonial centers abandoned. The Lord of xi'an's tomb provides crucial clues but no definitive answer to this great mystery. The evidence in his burial points to a society at its peak, confident and richly supplied. However, later Moche sites show signs of severe environmental stress. Researchers have uncovered evidence of a devastating, decades-long mega-drought, followed by catastrophic rainfall and flooding from a super El Niño event. These climatic catastrophes would have destroyed their agricultural systems, leading to famine and social upheaval. The very rituals the Lord of xi'an performed, meant to appease the gods for rain and fertility, may have ultimately failed, undermining the authority of the priestly class and causing the entire social order to fracture. The tomb of the Lord of xi'an thus stands as a magnificent but poignant monument. It captures a single, brilliant moment at the height of Moche power, a glittering snapshot of a civilization that understood art, power, and the divine, yet could not ultimately save itself from the forces of a changing world. As we move from the royal tombs of South America, our journey enters a more somber, misty landscape, the sprawling peat bogs of northern Europe. Stretching across Denmark, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands, these wetlands hold a haunting secret. For centuries, peat cutters digging for fuel have unearthed a gallery of the ancient dead. But these are not mere skeletons. The bog bodies, as they are known, are individuals so perfectly preserved that they seem to have died only recently. Their skin has been tanned to the texture of dark leather. Their facial features and hairstyles are often intact, and in some cases you can even see the faint lines on their fingertips. This incredible preservation is the work of the bogs themselves. The cold, acidic, oxygen-poor water prevents the bacteria of decay from thriving, while the sphagnum moss releases a natural tanning agent that slowly and methodically turns human skin to cured hide. The bog does not just preserve a body, it pickles it, creating a startlingly intimate and often deeply unsettling snapshot of a person's final moments. And it is those final moments that form the core of the mystery. These are not peaceful burials. The vast majority of bog bodies show clear, gruesome signs of a violent end. Take Tollund Man, found in Denmark and dating to the 4th century BC. When he was discovered in 1950, he looked so serene he was mistaken for a recent murder victim. A noose of braided leather was still wrapped tightly around his neck, the gentle expression on his face belying the brutality of his hanging. Or consider Grobel Man, another Danish bog body, whose throat was slit from ear to ear with such force that it nearly decapitated him. In Ireland, Old Croghan Man was found to have been stabbed, beheaded, and his body cut in half. His nipples had been sliced, and he was pinned down to the bottom of the bog with stakes of hazel wood. These are not the casual discarding of a corpse. They are methodical, almost ceremonial killings, each one telling a story of extreme, sanctioned violence. So, who were these people, and what terrible transgression or sacred duty led them to such a fate in the bog? Archaeologists and historians have wrestled with this question for decades, and several compelling theories have emerged. The most prominent theory suggests these individuals were ritual sacrifices, offered to the gods of the marshes to ensure a good harvest, fertility, or the stability of the tribe. Classical Roman writers like Tacitus described how the Germanic tribes of the region practiced human sacrifice, drowning those deemed unfit cowards, shirkers, and adulterers in bogs. This fits the evidence in many ways. The care taken with some of the bodies points to a ritual context. Toland man, for instance, was laid to rest in a sleeping position, and his last meal was a simple, ritual porridge containing seeds from both cultivated and wild plants, which some interpret as a symbolic offering. The bogs themselves were seen as liminal spaces, gateways to the otherworld, making them the perfect place to communicate with the divine through the ultimate offering, a human life. Another theory posits that these were executions of criminals or social outcasts. The brutal nature of the deaths and the occasional evidence of physical deformities or signs of illness could point to individuals being punished for bringing bad luck or violating a sacred tribal law. Old Croghan Man, for example, was a giant for his time, standing nearly 6 feet 6 inches tall, and his well-manicured hands showed no signs of hard labor, suggesting he may have been a person of high status. His horrific death could have been the result of a political coup, the ritual killing of a failed king, or the punishment of a noble who broke a profound taboo. The mutilation, particularly the cutting of his nipples, might have been a symbolic act of stripping him of his power or kingship, as sucking a king's nipples was a gesture of submission in early Irish culture. Yet the evidence is never clear-cut and often seems to contradict itself, deepening the enigma. If these were simply executed criminals, why were some, like Toland Man, laid so gently into the bog, his eyes and mouth carefully closed by those who deposited him? Why were some bodies accompanied by objects of value or their hair meticulously styled? This elaborate care suggests a form of respect, a reverence that seems at odds with the idea of discarding a social undesirable. It creates a disturbing duality. A community could both brutally kill one of its own and then treat their remains with a kind of solemn piety. This forces us to confront a worldview where violence and veneration were not opposites but two sides of the same sacred coin. The bog was not a dumping ground, it was an altar. These individuals, whether willing volunteers, condemned criminals, or chosen kings, were offered to the insatiable, dark gods of the earth, their deaths a necessary, if terrible, transaction to ensure the community's survival. They were sent into the mist as messengers, their bodies becoming a permanent part of the landscape they were meant to appease, their silent, preserved forms forever asking us the same question: was this murder or was it sacrifice? And in the world of the Iron Age, was there even a difference? Descending from the misty bogs of northern Europe, we plunge now into the humid, shadowy depths of the Maya world, where the boundary between life and death was not a line but a porous membrane. For the ancient Maya, the earth was alive with sacred power, and the most potent portals to the otherworld were not towering pyramids, but openings leading down into dark caves and, most famously, into the breathtakingly beautiful and terrifying natural wells known as cenotes. These deep, water-filled sinkholes, formed from the collapse of limestone bedrock, were far more than just sources of fresh water in the Yucatan Peninsula. They were the gaping mouths of Xibalba, the Maya underworld, a realm of gods, ancestors, and terrifying spirits. To approach the edge of a cenote is to stand at the precipice of another dimension, and it was here, in these sacred waters, that the Maya conducted some of their most profound and chilling rituals, offering precious treasures and, most solemnly, human lives to appease the powerful forces that governed their existence. Archaeological investigations of these sacred cenotes, particularly the Great Sacred Cenote at Chichen Itza, have revealed a staggering collection of artifacts that attest to centuries of devotion. Divers have recovered exquisite offerings of gold, jade, polished obsidian mirrors, intricately carved ceremonial objects, and countless pieces of pottery. Yet, intermingled with these priceless items are the remains of people. The skeletal evidence pulled from the murky depths tells a complex story. Some individuals show clear signs of violent trauma consistent with sacrifice, broken bones, marks from sharp implements, and indications that they were bound before being thrown into the water. However, the story is not one of uniform brutality. The victims were a diverse group, including men, women, and children. Some were likely war captives from rival city-states, their lives forfeit in a public display of power and piety. But others were not outsiders. Isotopic analysis of their bones and teeth reveals that many individuals spent their entire lives in the local area, suggesting they were Maya themselves. This raises the haunting possibility that some of the sacrifices were volunteers from within the community, or individuals chosen from among the elite to serve as messengers to the gods, a supreme honor that came with a terrifying price. While the cenotes served as vertical gateways to the watery underworld, the Maya also built horizontal monuments to death and power directly into their cityscapes. At the heart of Chichen Itza stands one of the most explicit and intimidating structures from the ancient world, the xi'an, or the platform of the skulls. This is not a burial site in the traditional sense, but a chilling display of triumph and cosmic order. The entire stone platform is carved with row upon row of stylized skulls, a stark and permanent reminder of the fate that awaited captives of war. The name itself translates to Wall of Skulls, and it is believed that this stone structure served as the base for wooden racks upon which the actual, decomposing heads of sacrificed individuals were impaled and displayed for all to see. This was not an act of hidden ritual. It was a public, political, and religious statement designed to demonstrate the might of Chichen Itza's rulers, to terrorize potential rivals, and to honor the gods who demanded such offerings to keep the world in balance. The identities of the people whose skulls adorned this grim monument are another layer of the mystery. Like the cenote victims, they were primarily captives taken in battle from neighboring polities. Warfare for the Maya was not just about territorial conquest. It was a holy endeavor, a means to acquire live captives who were essential for the most important state rituals. The public sacrifice of a high-status enemy king or warrior was the ultimate political and spiritual victory, a way to humiliate a rival dynasty while simultaneously feeding the sun god with the most precious substance known, human lifeblood. The skulls on the xi'an were trophies of these victories, each one representing a shattered enemy and a reaffirmation of the city's divine mandate to rule. The very public nature of this display was a form of psychological warfare, communicating a clear message to allies and enemies alike about the cost of defiance. All of these practices were deeply woven into the fabric of Maya cosmology. The world, in their view, was a delicate equilibrium maintained through reciprocity between humans and the gods. The deities had shed their own blood to create the world and humanity, and this divine sacrifice demanded repayment. Human blood, particularly the blood of kings drawn through ritual self-mutilation and the blood of captives offered in public spectacle, was the most powerful sustenance for the gods. It was the essential fuel that ensured the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the cosmic cycle would continue. The journey of the soul after death was also intricately tied to this worldview. Dying as a sacrifice, or in childbirth, or in battle, was considered an honorable death that could lead directly to a blessed afterlife, bypassing the treacherous trials of the underworld that awaited ordinary souls. Despite our growing understanding of this belief system, profound mysteries persist. Why were specific individuals chosen for the cenote over the xi'an, or vice versa? Was it purely a matter of their status as a captive, or were there deeper, more personal reasons known only to the priests and kings? The full ceremonial sequence, the specific chants spoken, the exact moment a victim was consigned to the dark waters. These intimate details of the rituals are lost to us, preserved only in the silent, stony gaze of the carved skulls and the dark, still water of the cenotes. We can reconstruct the framework of their beliefs from surviving codices and murals, but the living, breathing emotion of these ceremonies, the terror, the fervent prayer, the collective catharsis of the watching crowd eludes our grasp. The cenotes and the skull tower stand as stark, dual monuments to the Maya's sophisticated, and to our modern sensibility, unsettling understanding of the universe, a worldview where life, death, and divinity were inextricably linked in a cycle that demanded the ultimate payment. Now, let's move from the world of the Maya to a land of legendary pharaohs and forgotten kingdoms, the deserts of Sudan. While most people associate pyramids exclusively with Egypt, just south of the border, across a vast and sweeping desert landscape, stand the majestic pyramids of Nuri. This is the final resting place of the kings and queens of the Kingdom of Kush, a civilization so powerful it once conquered and ruled Egypt itself as the 25th dynasty. Far from being mere imitators, the Kushites developed their own distinct culture and architectural traditions, and the Nuri pyramids represent one of their most ambitious and mysterious royal projects. The site is breathtaking in its stark, silent grandeur. Over 20 pyramids, though now somewhat weathered by time and the elements, rise from the golden sands, their sharp, steeply sloped profiles creating a dramatic silhouette against the immense African sky. They are smaller than their famous Egyptian counterparts at Giza, but what they lack in sheer size, they more than make up for in historical significance and enigmatic allure. The most illustrious king buried here is Taharqa, perhaps the greatest ruler of the Kushite dynasty that controlled Egypt. His reign marked the zenith of Kushite power, a time when his influence stretched from the confluence of the Blue and White Nile all the way to the shores of the Mediterranean. His pyramid at Nuri was the largest ever built at the site, a fitting monument for a pharaoh who constructed temples and monuments from Thebes to the Sudan. Yet the choice of Nuri itself as his final resting place is a profound historical puzzle. For centuries, the Kushite kings had been buried at the nearby mountain of Jebel Sahaba, a site they considered the sacred home of their state god Amun. So why did Taharqa and his successors suddenly break with this tradition and establish an entirely new royal cemetery a few miles north at Nuri? This was not a casual decision. Moving a royal necropolis was a monumental undertaking fraught with religious and political meaning. One compelling theory centers on the concept of the perfect mountain. In ancient Egyptian and Kushite cosmology, the pyramid was a symbolic representation of the primeval mound, the first land to emerge from the waters of chaos at the dawn of creation. It was a ramp to the heavens for the soul of the king. Jebel Sahaba, with its distinctive free-standing pinnacle, was naturally seen as this perfect, God-given mountain. By moving to the flat plain at Nuri, the Kushite kings may have been making an even more powerful theological statement. They were asserting that their king was the embodiment of the primeval mound itself. His pyramid, a man-made mountain, was now the axis mundi, the center of the world, a declaration of independence from the older, natural sacred site. This shift suggests a growing confidence in their own royal ideology, separate from, though deeply influenced by, Egyptian traditions. The ongoing archaeological work at Nuri continues to peel back the layers of this mystery, revealing a complex picture of Kushite society and its evolving relationship with Egypt. Recent excavations, including those using ground-penetrating radar and meticulous manual digging, have uncovered new tombs belonging to royal women, the queens and mothers of the king, who wielded immense power in Kush. Their burial chambers, located deep beneath the pyramids, were filled with stunning artifacts, intricate jewelry of gold and carnelian, beautiful faience shabti figures meant to serve the deceased in the afterlife, and offering tables inscribed with hieroglyphs. The sheer wealth and quality of these objects demonstrate that Nuri was a necropolis for a fabulously wealthy and sophisticated court, one that was deeply engaged in the cultural and religious currents of the ancient world. Yet, the style of the artifacts also shows a unique blend of Egyptian motifs with distinctly Kushite artistic sensibilities, signaling a culture that was absorbing influences while fiercely maintaining its own identity. The shifting burial practices at Nuri also tell a story of changing political fortunes. After Taharka's reign, the Kushites were eventually expelled from Egypt by an invading Assyrian army. Retreating south to their Nubian homeland, the kings continued to be buried at Nuri for several more generations. However, the later pyramids at the site become progressively smaller and less elaborate. This gradual scaling down likely reflects the kingdom's diminished resources after losing the immense wealth of Egypt. It may also indicate a subtle shift in focus, a turning inward and a reconsolidation of power in the Kushite heartland. Eventually, the royal cemetery would shift once more further south to Marai, but Nuri represents that critical transitional period. It is the burial ground of kings who had experienced the pinnacle of imperial power and then had to navigate a new reality without it. The sands of Nuri hold the secrets of this golden age and its aftermath, and with every new tomb discovered, we get a little closer to understanding the full story of these mighty African pharaohs who, for a brief and glorious time, ruled the Nile from its source to its mouth. High in the icy embrace of the Indian Himalayas, at an altitude of over 16,000 feet, lies a small, unassuming glacial lake that holds a macabre and perplexing secret. For much of the year, Rupkund Lake is frozen solid and shrouded in mist, but during the brief summer melt, its receding ice reveals a chilling sight. The lake bed and its shores are strewn with the ancient bones of hundreds of individuals. This is Skeleton Lake, a place of stark beauty and profound mystery, where the silence is broken only by the wind and the whispers of the dead. The site was first brought to wider attention in 1942 by a British forest ranger, though it had long been known to local villagers who wove the location into their folklore. The initial discovery, coming during the tensions of World War II, even sparked fears that the remains might be those of Japanese soldiers attempting a covert infiltration. This theory was quickly dismissed, but it set the stage for decades of speculation about who these people were and what terrible fate had befallen them in such a remote and inhospitable place. The early theories were as dramatic as the landscape itself. One prevailing idea suggested these were the remains of a king, his queen, and their entire royal entourage, who had undertaken a pilgrimage to a nearby mountain shrine and been caught in a freak, catastrophic blizzard. Another hypothesis posited that they were a detachment of soldiers from a much larger army, perhaps soldiers of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, who had become lost and perished from exposure. The sheer number of skeletons, initially estimated in the hundreds, seemed to support the idea of a single, large group meeting a simultaneous, devastating end. The most compelling local legend, however, told of a king who violated the sanctity of the Nanda Devi mountain goddess by dancing and reveling at the sacred lake. In her wrath, the goddess summoned a storm of iron hail as hard as iron, destroying the entire party where they stood. For years, these stories were all historians had to work with, as the harsh environment and the fragile, scattered nature of the bones made comprehensive study incredibly difficult. The true revolution in understanding came with the advent of advanced scientific techniques. In the early 2000s, an international team of researchers collected bone and tissue samples from the Rupkund remains and subjected them to rigorous genetic and isotopic analysis. The results, published in recent years, were nothing short of revolutionary and completely overturned the idea of a single tragic event. The carbon dating revealed that the skeletons were not from one time period, but from two distinct episodes of death separated by roughly 1,000 years. Even more astonishingly, the genetic evidence showed that the individuals came from wildly different ancestral groups. One group, which died around the 8th century AD, had genetics linking them to present-day people from South Asia, consistent with the theory of a local pilgrimage. The second, larger group, dating to around the 17th century, presented a stunning surprise. Their DNA was most closely related to people from the Eastern Mediterranean, specifically modern-day Greece and Crete. This genetic bombshell shattered all previous assumptions. It was not one group, but at least two entirely separate groups from different continents and different millennia, whose bones had become intermingled in the high mountain basin. The immediate question is, of course, what were people from the Mediterranean doing in the high Himalayas in the 17th century? This was long after the era of Alexander the Great's contacts with the region, and there are no historical records of any large-scale Mediterranean travel or settlement that far into India at that time. One plausible theory suggests they could have been traders or merchants attempting an unknown overland route. Another, more speculative idea is that they were mercenaries or adventurers in the service of a local ruler. The isotopic analysis of their bones adds another layer of intrigue, indicating that their diet in the years leading up to their death was primarily based on Mediterranean grains, not the staples of the Indian subcontinent. This suggests they were not long-term residents of the region, but relatively recent arrivals, making their presence at this specific, remote lake even more difficult to explain. So what catastrophic event could have killed these diverse groups centuries apart? The evidence on the bones themselves provides a grimly consistent clue. Many of the skulls and shoulder bones across both genetic groups show short, deep, penetrating fractures that are not consistent with weapons, rock slides, or an avalanche. Instead, the pattern of injuries perfectly matches the trauma that would be caused by large, round objects falling from a great height. This forensic evidence provides startling scientific corroboration for the ancient local legend of the Iron Hail. It appears that both groups, separated by 1,000 years, fell victim to the same terrifying phenomenon, a sudden, violent hailstorm. At that altitude, there is absolutely no shelter. The hailstones in the Himalayas can reach the size of cricket balls, and being caught in the open in such a storm would be a death sentence. The blows to the head would have been immediately incapacitating or fatal, explaining why so many died in one place, their bodies preserved by the cold and eventually gathered into the lake by glacial movement. The mystery of Rupkund, however, is not entirely solved. While the hail theory provides a convincing cause of death, it does not explain the purpose of the journey. Why would a group of men and women from the Mediterranean undertake such an arduous and dangerous trek to a remote Himalayan lake, a site sacred to a religion not their own? The pilgrimage route to the Nanda Devi Raj Jat festival passes near the lake, but this is a Hindu observance. Were these foreigners converts? Were they simply lost? The complete absence of any historical record of their journey is deafening. Furthermore, the presence of the earlier South Asian group suggests that the route itself, or the lake, held a significance that drew people across the centuries, only for them to fall victim to the mountain's unpredictable fury. Rupkund Lake thus remains one of archaeology's most fascinating cold cases. It is a story not of one mystery, but of two intertwined enigmas: a Mediterranean puzzle box deposited in the heart of the Himalayas, and a local legend validated by modern science, all set against the backdrop of a landscape that remains as beautiful and deadly as ever. The skeletons silently challenge us, their presence a testament to forgotten journeys, catastrophic weather, and the enduring, haunting power of the mountains to keep their secrets. From the icy death trap of Rupkund, we venture now into the humid, rolling highlands of central Laos, to a landscape that feels less like a cemetery and more like a giant's abandoned storeroom. Here, across the Xi'an Plateau, thousands of immense stone jars are scattered in clusters among the grass and trees, some standing upright, others tilted at odd angles, as if some colossal beings had simply walked away and left their work unfinished. This is the Plain of Jars, and its silent, monolithic sentinels guard one of Southeast Asia's most enduring archaeological mysteries. The jars themselves are hewn from a variety of local stone, including sandstone, granite, and conglomerate, and their sizes are staggering. They range from manageable vessels a meter or so tall to absolute behemoths weighing several tons and standing over 3 meters high, their rims often decorated with simple but deliberate carvings of human figures, faces, or concentric circles. Scattered around these megalithic jars, archaeologists have uncovered a wealth of associated artifacts that hint at their purpose: smaller ceramic jars, intricately carved stone discs that may have served as lids, colorful glass and stone beads, spindle whorls for weaving, and tools of both iron and bronze. Alongside these objects lie human remains, but not in the way one might expect. The bones found are often fragmentary, charred, and mixed together, suggesting a complex and multi-stage burial process rather than a simple, single interment. The central question, of course, is who created these jars and what were they used for? The most widely accepted theory among archaeologists, based on the physical evidence, is that they functioned as part of an elaborate excarnation ritual, similar in concept to Stonehenge but on a much grander, more permanent scale. In this scenario, the bodies of the deceased would not be buried immediately. Instead, they would be placed inside these massive stone jars, where the elements and natural processes would slowly decompose the soft tissue. After a suitable period, the remaining bones would be collected, ceremonially cleaned, and then often burned in a secondary cremation rite. The charred bone fragments and ash would then be buried in pits around the jars, sometimes accompanied by the grave goods we find today. This practice explains the fragmented and commingled nature of the remains and positions the jars not as final resting places, but as transformative vessels, a crucial tool in a spiritual process that guided the dead from one state of being to the next. The stone discs found nearby fit perfectly into this theory, as they could have been used to seal the jars during this initial decomposition, containing the process and perhaps symbolically sealing the soul within for its transformation. Yet, the local legends offer a far more dramatic and imaginative origin story, one that has been passed down through generations. Lao folklore tells of a race of giants, the Kun-Chuang, who once inhabited this highland plain. These giants, led by a powerful king, were said to have crafted the immense jars to brew and store colossal quantities of a celebratory rice liquor called Lao Lao. According to the tales, the king commanded the creation of the jars to mark a great military victory, and the hundreds of vessels were needed to provide a fitting feast for his giant army. This enchanting myth provides a poetic, if not literal, explanation for the jar's existence, transforming the archaeological site into a scene of epic celebration from a forgotten age. While science points to mortuary practice, the human heart is often drawn to the grander narrative of giants and their legendary revels, showing how ancient mysteries naturally seed the growth of rich and enduring folklore. Modern archaeological work, led by teams from Laos and Australia, has begun to peel back the layers of this mystery with more precision than ever before. Through extensive excavation and advanced scientific techniques like uranium series dating, researchers have been able to determine that the jars were most likely put in place much earlier than previously thought, with the main period of use dating from as early as 1240 BC to as late as 660 AD. This timeline places the jar sites firmly in the Southeast Asian Iron Age, a period of increasing social complexity and long-distance trade. The discovery of artifacts such as carnelian and glass beads, which have origins linking them to India, suggests that the people who used the plain of jars were not an isolated group, but were connected to wider regional networks. This emerging picture is of a sophisticated, organized society capable of quarrying, transporting, and carving these multi-ton stone jars, a society with a distinct and complex set of spiritual beliefs centered around honoring their dead. But the final answers remain elusive. We still do not know the name of this culture, as they left behind no deciphered written records, the exact steps of their mortuary rituals, the specific meanings behind the carvings on the jar rims, and the social hierarchy that determined who was worthy of such an elaborate send-off are details that continue to evade us. The very landscape of the Plain of Jaws adds another layer of poignant mystery and tragedy, for the area was heavily bombed during the Vietnam War, leaving vast sections inaccessible and littered with unexploded ordnance, which to this day hinders archaeological exploration and serves as a stark, modern contrast to the ancient silence of the stones. The Jaws, therefore, stand as patient, enigmatic monuments to a people whose entire identity has been distilled down to their unique approach to death. They are a testament to a profound belief in an afterlife, a community's labor of love and grief, and a puzzle that continues to challenge us from the misty highlands of Laos. Yet another form of sky burial awaits us, but this one trades the open coastal circle for vertigo-inducing heights. Deep within the mountainous river gorges of southern China, in Sichuan and Yunnan provinces, a sight unfolds that seems to defy both gravity and reason. Clinging to the faces of sheer limestone cliffs, hundreds of feet above the swirling waters below, are ancient coffins. Some are perched precariously on wooden stakes that have been driven directly into the rock, creating a forest of timber supporting these heavy, boat-like caskets. Others are nestled deep within the shelter of natural caves, their entrances looking out over the vast chasms, positioned in places that would be challenging to reach even with modern climbing equipment. These are the mysterious cliff burials of the Bo people, and they represent one of the most visually stunning and technically baffling funerary traditions in the entire world. The coffins themselves are artifacts of remarkable craftsmanship. Most were carved from a single, massive tree trunk, typically a valuable nanmu wood, which was split in half, hollowed out, and then fitted with a lid, creating a dugout canoe-like shape. This boat symbolism is not accidental and provides a vital clue to their beliefs. Many of these coffins were oriented to face the rivers flowing far below, suggesting the Bo people may have viewed these waterways as a symbolic conduit to the afterlife. The journey of the soul, they might have believed, required a vessel to carry it to the realm of the ancestors or the gods, and the coffin itself became that final, sacred boat. Adding to this otherworldly scene, many of the cliff faces surrounding the burials are adorned with vibrant red ochre paintings. These pictograms depict a rich tapestry of Bo life and belief, scenes of hunting, dancing, and warfare, alongside more mystical symbols like the sun, horses, and stylized human figures. These paintings are the Bo people's only written record, a visual language we can see but cannot fully translate. The most pressing practical question is how they accomplished this incredible feat of engineering. How did a Bronze Age or early Iron Age culture without pulleys or powered machinery managed to lift coffins that could weigh over 1,000 pounds to such dizzying, inaccessible locations? Historians and archaeologists have proposed several theories, each as ingenious as the last. One method might have involved skilled climbers scaling the cliffs to implant the wooden stakes or to establish a network of ropes and ropes. Once these supports were in place, the coffin could have been hauled up from above using a complex system of levers and winches, or perhaps laboriously pulled upward from the riverbank below using a series of interlocking rope ladders and sheer human muscle. Another theory suggests the builders may have constructed massive bamboo scaffolding from the ground up, creating a temporary framework that allowed workers to carry the coffin to its final resting place, after which the scaffolding was dismantled. The most perilous hypothesis involves workers descending from the clifftop, lowering the coffin on ropes and then painstakingly maneuvering it onto the waiting stakes or into the cave mouths. Regardless of the specific technique, the undertaking was clearly monumental, requiring precise coordination, immense courage, and a powerful communal motivation. This profound motivation likely stems from the Bo people's spiritual worldview. Placing the dead in high places is a recurring theme in many cultures, often rooted in the desire to physically move the deceased closer to the heavens, the domain of the gods and ancestral spirits. By positioning their dead on cliffs, the Bo were effectively creating a ladder to the sky, ensuring the soul had a direct and unobstructed path for its ascent. The height also served a very practical protective function. It safeguarded the remains from scavenging animals and from the floods that would have periodically ravaged the river valleys below. But perhaps most importantly, it isolated the dead, separating the powerful and potentially dangerous spiritual energy of death from the daily life of the community. In many traditional beliefs, the recently deceased are in a liminal state and their spirits can be unpredictable. By consigning them to the cliffs, the Bo people may have been creating a sacred quarantine, a realm for the dead that was honorably separate, yet still physically visible and connected to the land of their descendants. Tragically, the very people who went to such extraordinary lengths to achieve immortality for their dead ultimately vanished from history themselves. The Bo culture thrived for centuries, but by the end of the Ming dynasty in the 17th century, they had disappeared from the historical record. The reasons for their disappearance remain a subject of debate, but the most widely accepted theory points to a brutal series of military campaigns waged by the Imperial Chinese Army against the ethnic groups of the region. Historical accounts speak of genocidal campaigns intended to pacify the southwestern frontier, campaigns that could have decimated the Bo population through warfare, forced assimilation, or dispersal. Their vibrant culture, their language, and the secrets behind their most sacred rituals were extinguished, leaving only their silent coffins suspended in the mist as a haunting memorial. Today, these cliffside burials stand as a poignant paradox. They are a breathtaking testament to human ingenuity and spiritual devotion, a permanent monument to a people's love and respect for their ancestors. Yet they are also a heartbreaking symbol of cultural loss, the empty boats of a civilization that set sail for the afterlife, leaving no one behind to tell their story. Leaving the hanging coffins of China behind, we set sail for the sun-drenched island of Crete, where a civilization of unparalleled elegance and sophistication built its legacy not on pyramids or fortresses, but on sprawling, colorful palaces and enigmatic tombs that whisper of a society unlike any other in the ancient world. The Minoans, named for the legendary King Minos, flourished for centuries, their culture centered around vast, labyrinthine palace complexes like Knossos and Phaistos, adorned with vibrant frescoes of leaping dolphins and graceful bull leapers. Yet, for all their apparent joy in life and their mastery of the sea, their approach to death was equally distinctive, creating burial monuments that are as architecturally unique as they are mysterious. Across the Cretan landscape, two primary types of tombs dominate the archaeological record: the large, circular, above-ground structures known as tholoi, and the complex, multi-chambered burial caves that honeycomb the island's hillside. The tholoi tombs are particularly striking. Imagine a massive, beehive-shaped structure built of rough, uncut stone, its circular walls rising to form a corbelled dome, all enclosed within a rectangular outer wall. These were not single graves, but communal vaults used for generations by what appear to be extended families or powerful clans. Entering one of these tombs, even in its ruined state, is an immersive experience. The air is cool and still, and the space within is often surprisingly large, capable of holding dozens of the dead. The bodies were not placed in sarcophagi in the early periods, but were often laid directly on the floor, accompanied by a stunning array of grave goods that speak to the Minoans' artistry and their beliefs about the afterlife. Archaeologists have uncovered exquisite Khmer's ware pottery, with its delicate, eggshell-thin walls and spiraling designs in white and red on a glossy black background. They have found intricately carved seal stones, tiny works of art used to mark ownership and identity, depicting everything from mythical griffins to complex religious symbols. Alongside these precious items, evidence of elaborate funeral feasts is common. Piles of animal bones, the remains of wine and olive oil in beautiful vessels, and large ceremonial drinking cups suggest that the Minoans saw death not just as an end, but as a transition marked by communal celebration and ritual offering to the departed. This wealth of artifacts, however, leads us directly to the central, haunting mystery of Minoan society. Who were the people deemed worthy of such elaborate and continuous veneration? Unlike in contemporary Egypt or Mesopotamia, there is a conspicuous absence of any evidence for a single, all-powerful monarch in Minoan Crete. The grand palaces lack the towering statues, the bombastic inscriptions, and the colossal tombs dedicated to a sole ruler that we find elsewhere. The burials in the tholoi and the rich burial caves are collective. This has led to a compelling theory that Minoan society was structured less like a monarchy and more like a theocracy or a complex oligarchy, where power was shared among a class of elite families, perhaps priest-kings and priest-queens who governed collectively. The individuals buried with such rich goods were likely the leading members of these powerful clans, wealthy merchants who controlled the sea trade, high-ranking religious figures who presided over the sacred bull-leaping ceremonies, or skilled artisans whose work was revered. They were an elite, but an elite whose authority seems to have been woven into the fabric of the community rather than towering above it. Their status demonstrated through their participation in a shared ancestral tomb and the accumulation of beautiful objects across generations. The ultimate frustration, and the reason this mystery remains so deeply unresolved, lies in the Minoans' own written words. They developed a script which we call Linear A, and it appears on clay tablets, religious offerings, and storage jars throughout their sites. We can see that it was a fully functional administrative script used for recording inventories, economic transactions, and likely religious texts. But despite decades of effort by the world's best linguists and cryptographers, Linear A remains undeciphered. We cannot read a single word of it. This means that the names of the people in the tombs are lost to us. We do not know their titles, their specific roles in society, or the stories of their lives. We cannot read their prayers or their hymns to the gods, leaving their entire spiritual worldview shrouded in silence. The vibrant frescoes give us glimpses of their ceremonies, and the artifacts hint at their wealth. But without the words, we are like visitors to a magnificent art gallery where all the placards have been erased. We can appreciate the beauty, but the stories behind the creators, the meaning of the symbols, and the nuances of their power structures remain just beyond our grasp. This linguistic void forces us to rely entirely on the silent testimony of the objects and the bones themselves, an interpretation that is fraught with challenges. For instance, the fact that the tombs were used collectively over long periods suggests a powerful emphasis on lineage and ancestry, with each new burial reinforcing the status and continuity of the family line. The presence of valuable imported materials like ivory from Egypt and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan within the tombs tells us that these elites were at the center of a vast and prosperous maritime trade network. Yet, we cannot know if the wealth was passed down through primogeniture or shared among siblings, or whether the highest status belonged to warriors, traders, or priests. The Minoan civilization ultimately met a turbulent end, likely from a combination of natural disasters like the colossal eruption of Thera and invasion by the more warlike Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. The Mycenaeans would adopt and adapt much of Minoan culture, even developing their own script Linear B, which we can read. But Linear B was used primarily for palace inventories in a very different, more warlike society. It provides only a faint, distorted echo of the original Minoan world. The tholoi and the burial caves thus stand as majestic, beautiful, and profoundly silent monuments. They hold the physical remains of a dazzlingly sophisticated and seemingly peaceful civilization, a people who celebrated life and honored their dead with artistry and communal feasting, but who took the intimate knowledge of their own identities and beliefs with them into the earth, leaving us with a puzzle written in a language we may never learn to speak. Traveling from the sophisticated Minoan world, we journey now to the other side of the globe and back in time to the very cradle of civilization in the Americas. Nestled in the arid Soup Valley of Peru, the sacred city of Caral is a place that fundamentally rewrites our understanding of ancient history. This sprawling complex of monumental pyramidal structures, sunken circular plazas, and residential neighborhoods is not just old, it is the oldest known city in the Americas, flourishing as a vibrant urban center as early as 2600 BC. This means that while the Great Pyramids of Giza were being raised in Egypt, the people of Caral were simultaneously constructing their own impressive monuments, a world away and in complete isolation. The site takes your breath away with its sheer scale and ambition. 6 major pyramidal structures dominate the landscape, the largest rising to a height of nearly 100 feet, built from stone and earth fill and faced with retaining walls. These were not haphazard mounds, they were carefully engineered platforms accessed by grand staircases and topped with ceremonial rooms and sacred hearths. Surrounding these central temples are distinct residential districts for both the elite and the commoners, along with amphitheater-like sunken plazas that could have held hundreds of people for public gatherings. This was a fully realized, complex city, a testament to a society that had mastered architecture, urban planning, and social organization. Yet, when archaeologists began to excavate the burial sites associated with this magnificent city, they encountered a mystery that stands in stark contrast to other ancient civilizations. Unlike the opulent tombs of the Lord of Sipan or the royal pyramids of Egypt, the graves at Caral are strikingly, deliberately modest. The deceased were typically interred in simple, shallow pits, either within the platforms of the pyramids themselves or in the residential areas. Their bodies were usually flexed, wrapped in cotton cloth or reed mats, and accompanied by a very limited set of grave goods. These were not the treasures of god-kings. They might include a simple necklace of shell beads, a few carved bone or stone ornaments, or some utilitarian tools. There is a complete absence of the grandiose wealth, the sacrificed retainers, or the symbols of military might that we so often associate with the rise of powerful rulers in the ancient world. This profound modesty in death forces us to ask a radical question about Caral's society. If there were no fabulously wealthy warrior kings, who was in charge of organizing the labor to build these colossal pyramids, and what kind of power did they wield? The plot thickens when you consider the complete absence of any evidence for warfare or organized violence at Caral. Extensive excavations have revealed no fortifications, no defensive walls, no weapons designed for combat, and no skeletal remains showing signs of battle trauma. In a world where we often assume civilization was forged in conflict, Caral presents a stunning anomaly. A major urban society that appears to have been fundamentally peaceful for over 1,000 years. This finding upends the traditional narrative that social complexity and monumental architecture necessarily require a coercive, militaristic elite to command the population. Without an obvious warrior class to enforce its will, the ruling group at Caral must have derived its authority from a completely different source. The society seems to have been structured not by the threat of the spear, but by the power of persuasion, belief, and economic benefit. So, if not warriors, who were the leaders of Caral, and how did they maintain their influence? The most compelling theories point to a powerful combination of religion and trade as the foundation of their social hierarchy. The layout of the city itself is a blueprint for a theocratic state. The Grand Pyramids were almost certainly centers of religious power, where a class of priests or priestesses conducted ceremonies to honor their deities, likely associated with the sky, the earth, and the vital elements needed for survival in a desert environment. These religious leaders would have held immense sway, positioned as the essential intermediaries between the people and the forces that controlled their fate: the rains, the fertility of the land, and the productivity of the sea. Their ability to predict celestial events or perform rituals believed to ensure abundance would have granted them legitimate and willingly accepted authority. This was power based on knowledge and spiritual connection, not brute force. Simultaneously, Caral's economy was a powerhouse of long-distance trade, and this appears to be the other pillar of its leaders' control. Archaeologists have uncovered compelling evidence that the city was a central node in a vast exchange network. The inhabitants of this inland valley were consuming vast quantities of anchovies and sardines, meaning they had established robust trade routes with coastal communities dozens of miles away. In return, Cairo produced and exported its own valuable commodities. The city's residents grew and processed cotton on an industrial scale, using it to create the sophisticated fishing nets that were essential for the coastal economy. They also cultivated and traded exotic and possibly psychoactive plants, like the seeds of the vilca tree, which were used in snuff for shamanistic rituals. The leaders of Cairo were likely the masterminds who coordinated this complex economic system. They controlled the production and distribution of these highly valued goods, fostering interdependence between different regions and amassing influence not through conquest but through commerce. They were the original entrepreneurs, their power built on networks of exchange that brought prosperity to the entire Soup Valley. Yet, for all we have pieced together, the most intimate secrets of Cairo's leadership remain buried. We can see the structures they built and the goods they traded, but we cannot yet put a face or a name to them. The modest burials have yielded no inscribed tablets, no royal seals, and no depictions of individual rulers. Were the leaders a single hereditary dynasty of priest-kings, or was power shared among a council of elders from different lineages? Were there charismatic individuals whose personal authority launched this civilizational project? The answers to these questions lie hidden in the dust of the ancient plazas and within the unassuming graves. The very modesty of their burials might be the ultimate clue, a conscious cultural choice to emphasize the collective over the individual, the community's enduring spirit over the glorification of a single person. The people of Cairo built for the ages, creating a city that would stand for millennia, but they seemingly asked for no personal monuments. They left behind a majestic, silent city that challenges our deepest assumptions about power, proving that the first great chapter of civilization in the Americas was written not by warriors, but by traders, farmers, and visionary priests who understood that true authority could be woven from threads of faith and mutual prosperity. But for all the legendary kings and fearsome chieftains immortalized in the sagas, their physical remains, and the magnificent ships that were to carry them to the next world, have proven frustratingly elusive. We shift our focus now from the celebrated ship burials like Oseberg to the ones that have slipped through the cracks of history, the ghost ships of the Norse world that archaeologists are still desperately trying to find. The classic Viking ship burial was a spectacle of power and belief. A great chieftain or noble would be laid to rest within the hull of his ship, a vessel that was either dragged ashore and buried in a specially dug trench or simply covered over with a massive mound of earth and stone. This wasn't just a coffin, it was a functional vessel for the afterlife, stocked with everything the deceased would need for the journey ahead. Think of it as the ultimate provisioning for an eternal voyage. The burial would contain weapons for battle swords, axes, and spears. There would be tools for daily life, cauldrons for cooking, and often the solemn sacrifice of horses, dogs, and sometimes even loyal servants or slaves, all to accompany their master into the realm of the gods. The ship itself, pointed toward the sea, was a powerful symbol. It was the means by which this formidable leader had gained his wealth and power in life, and it was the vehicle that would now transport his soul across the mythical waters to Valhalla or to the hall of the sea god Aegir. One of the most tantalizing of these missing graves belongs to the man credited with unifying Norway into a single kingdom, Harald Fairhair. According to the sagas, after his death around 930 AD, Harald was buried in a massive burial mound on the shores of Karmsundet, a vital shipping channel that was effectively the main street of the Viking Age Norwegian coast. This was the very area that gave us the rich Oseberg and Gokstad burials, a landscape practically designed for royal interments. Yet, despite generations of searching, the grave of this foundational king has never been conclusively found. The search is complicated by the nature of the sources. The sagas, written down centuries after the events they describe, are a mix of historical fact, poetic exaggeration, and outright myth. They might give a general location like near Horgesund, but the specific mound, if it ever existed, has been lost to 1,000 years of farming, road building, and urban development. Finding Harald's ship would be the Norwegian equivalent of discovering the tomb of a figure like King Arthur. It would provide tangible archaeological proof for the origins of the Norwegian state, offering direct insight into the wealth, artistic tastes, and martial culture of the court of its very first king. The hunt for these unlocated royal mounds is a blend of high-tech archaeology and old-fashioned detective work. Modern surveys employ ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry to scan beneath the soil without breaking ground, looking for the distinctive outline of a ship's hull or the magnetic signature of a large concentration of metal artifacts like rivets or weapons. Archaeologists cross-reference these surveys with place name evidence, as many locations in Scandinavia contain the Old Norse word "horga," meaning mound, hinting at a long-lost burial site. They also study the topography, searching for prominent man-made hills in locations that would have commanded respect, overlooking important sea lanes or fertile valleys. Every potential site is a gamble, requiring meticulous excavation that could end in a monumental discovery or a simple, empty pit. The challenges are immense. Many mounds were plundered in antiquity or cleared by farmers in later centuries. Others may have been built of materials that have completely decayed, leaving no trace for our instruments to detect. And some, perhaps, are still right where the sagas said they were, simply waiting for the right combination of technology, funding, and sheer luck to reveal their secrets. The potential reward for such a discovery, however, is incalculable. An untouched royal ship burial from this formative period could fundamentally rewrite our understanding of early Norse kingship. We know from sites like Oseberg that women could hold immense ritual and political power, but what would the grave of a unified Norway's first king tell us about the nature of his authority? Would his grave goods show stronger connections to the Christian kingdoms of Europe, hinting at the religious shifts to come? Or would they be a definitive statement of pagan power, more extravagant and brutal than anything we've seen before? Furthermore, such a find could illuminate the origins of the ship burial ritual itself. Was it a tradition that evolved slowly among coastal chieftains, or was it a dramatic innovation adopted by a rising royal dynasty to legitimize its rule, linking their power directly to the seafaring prowess that defined their culture? Each missing ship is a locked chest containing answers to these profound questions. They are the physical echoes of the kings and heroes whose names we know only from epic poetry, their final voyages interrupted, their ships grounded, waiting in the dark earth for the day we finally learn to read the landscape well enough to find them. And now we travel to the arid, sun-scorched landscape of the American Southwest, to a place that feels less like a canyon and more like a sprawling, silent cathedral. This is Choco Canyon, the monumental heart of the ancestral Puebloan world. Between the 9th and 12th centuries, this was the center of a vast cultural network, a place where people converged for trade, ceremony, and community. The canyon floor is dominated by massive, multi-storied, great houses, structures like Pueblo Bonito and Chetroketle, which were not simple villages but elaborate architectural feats with hundreds of rooms, great kivas sunken deep into the earth for religious ceremonies, and a sophisticated system of roads connecting them to outlying communities hundreds of miles away. These buildings were precisely aligned with solar and lunar cycles, turning the entire canyon into a colossal celestial calendar. Yet, for all this breathtaking public architecture, it is within the walls of these great houses, in a small number of secluded rooms and crypts, that archaeologists have uncovered a mystery that challenges our very understanding of this ancient society: the burials of individuals accompanied by a staggering concentration of wealth. The nature of this wealth is uniquely southwestern, but its scale is almost royal. In one particularly striking crypt within Pueblo Bonito, known as Room 33, excavators found the remains of two individuals interred with an astonishing collection of artifacts. The most prolific material was turquoise, a sacred stone of immense spiritual and economic value. These two individuals were buried with over 100,000 pieces of worked turquoise. Imagine not just a few necklaces, but entire baskets filled with polished beads, intricate pendants, and delicate inlay fragments. They were accompanied by thousands of shell beads, painstakingly crafted from mollusks harvested from the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of California, a testament to trade routes stretching across the continent. There were finely painted ceramic vessels, wooden staffs, and other ceremonial objects. This was not a simple offering for the afterlife. This was a hoard, a concentration of material goods so dense it seems to represent the collective wealth of the entire Chaconne system, all deposited with a select few. This dramatic inequality in death has sparked one of the most intense debates in southwestern archaeology. Was Choco Canyon an egalitarian society, a collective of communities that pooled their resources for grand communal projects, or was it a stratified society ruled by a powerful elite? The traditional view of ancestral Puebloan society leans toward the collective, emphasizing shared labor and communal rituals within the kivas. In this model, the great houses might have been neutral ground, a kind of ancient pilgrimage center where different groups gathered for seasonal ceremonies, and the individuals buried with wealth might have been revered ritual specialists or community leaders whose status was earned, not inherited. Their rich grave goods in this view could have been symbolic, representing the community's collective resources entrusted to them for their spiritual journey, rather than a sign of personal, accumulated power. However, the sheer scale and exclusivity of the wealth in burials like Room 33 present a formidable challenge to this purely egalitarian model. If these individuals were simply respected elders, why is their burial wealth orders of magnitude greater than anyone else's in the canyon? The distribution is not just uneven, it is profoundly skewed. The vast majority of the population was buried with very few, if any, grave goods. This stark contrast suggests a society where access to prestige goods was tightly controlled, a classic hallmark of social hierarchy. The concentration of exotic materials like Pacific seashells and macaw feathers from Mesoamerica points to a ruling class that monopolized long-distance trade networks, using these rare items to legitimize their authority and set themselves apart. The very architecture supports this idea. The intricate, labor-intensive construction of the great houses with their core and veneer stonework would have required a coordinated, directed workforce, something that strongly implies a centralized authority with the power to command labor. The mystery deepens when we ask who these individuals were. Were they a dynasty of powerful chieftains, a lineage of hereditary rulers who lived in opulence while directing the construction of the great houses? Or were they a theocracy of priest-kings whose authority was purely spiritual, derived from their role as intermediaries with the gods? The evidence is frustratingly ambiguous. Some researchers point to the lack of obvious symbols of coercive power. There are no depictions of warriors, no caches of weapons specifically for warfare, and no fortifications at the height of Choco's power. This supports the idea of a peaceful, ritually based leadership. Yet, the ability to amass such wealth and command such labor is itself a form of power, regardless of whether it was backed by the threat of force. Recent scientific analysis has added a new layer to the puzzle. DNA and isotopic studies of the remains from these rich burials suggest they might represent a distinct maternal lineage, hinting that status could have been inherited through the female line. This finding transforms the debate, suggesting that Choco's social structure may have been a unique blend of collective ideology and a subtle, inherited hierarchy, a complex system where spiritual authority and family lineage were inextricably linked. Ultimately, the silent crypts of Choco Canyon refuse to give up a simple answer. The canyon stands as a profound paradox, a landscape of monumental communal architecture built, it seems, for the benefit of a society that also permitted staggering inequalities in death. The individuals buried with thousands of turquoise beads and seashells from distant shores were clearly set apart, their status memorialized in the very bones of the great houses. Yet, whether they were kings, priests, or simply the temporary custodians of their people's collective wealth, we may never know for certain. Their legacy is a haunting question mark at the heart of the ancestral Puebloan world, a reminder that even in a society that seemed to build in harmony with the cosmos, the human dynamics of power, prestige, and belief could create patterns as complex and enigmatic as the great houses themselves. From the communal crypts of Choco Canyon, we now venture into the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia to confront a historical void that has tantalized explorers and scholars for centuries, the deliberately lost grave of the man who forged history's largest contiguous land empire. The mystery of Genghis Khan's burial site is not one of a forgotten location, but of a secret so fiercely and successfully guarded that it remains intact nearly 800 years after his death. According to the most reliable accounts, including the secret history of the Mongols, when the great Khan died in 1227, his body was transported in a solemn procession back toward his homeland, the sacred region of Burkhan in northeastern Mongolia. To ensure the site's eternal secrecy, the funeral escort enacted a protocol of terrifying thoroughness. They killed every person they encountered along the route, eliminating any potential witness. Once the body was interred in a grave whose location has never been revealed, the story goes that 1,000 horsemen then trampled the ground repeatedly to erase all trace of the disturbance. The most persistent legend asserts that a river was even temporarily diverted to flow over the burial site, using the water itself as a permanent, shifting shield. Finally, the slaves who dug the tomb and the soldiers who killed the witnesses were themselves reportedly executed, creating a chain of silence with no remaining links. This was not merely a burial, it was an act of historical erasure, a final command from an emperor who understood that true power could extend beyond life, controlling not just how he was remembered, but whether he could be found at all. The modern quest to find this ultimate lost tomb has become a kind of holy grail for archaeologists, driven by a mix of cutting-edge technology and deep historical reverence. Expeditions have swept across the suspected regions of Mongolia, particularly around the Khentai province, an area long associated with the Khan's birthplace and early life. Researchers have employed high-resolution satellite imagery to scan thousands of square miles of terrain for subtle, man-made patterns invisible from the ground. They have used ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers in an attempt to peer beneath the soil without breaking it, searching for the telltale signature of a hidden structure or a concentration of artifacts. These high-tech hunts are often guided by painstaking analysis of medieval texts and oral histories, trying to cross-reference vague geographical clues with the modern landscape. Yet, every promising lead has ultimately led to a dead end. Some expeditions have found significant archaeological sites from the Mongol period, but none can be definitively linked to Genghis Khan himself. The very landscape seems to protect its secret, its vastness and the passage of centuries combining to defy even our most sophisticated tools. The challenge is compounded by the nature of Mongolian burial traditions of the era. High-status Mongols were often interred without the massive stone pyramids or mounds that mark other imperial tombs, making their graves inherently more difficult to detect and leaving the steppe to reclaim them completely. The immense significance of this search extends far beyond the thrill of discovery. To find the tomb of Genghis Khan would be to unlock a time capsule from the pinnacle of the Mongol Empire, potentially containing artifacts and information that could radically reshape our understanding of 13th century world history. Imagine the insights that could be gleaned from the personal effects of the emperor who connected East and West, whose Pax Mongolica allowed for the unprecedented exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across Eurasia. His grave would likely hold not only priceless treasures reflecting the empire's immense wealth, but also objects of profound cultural and spiritual importance, offering a direct window into the beliefs and rituals of the Mongol elite. Furthermore, genetic material could resolve long-standing debates about his lineage and provide a definitive biological profile. For the people of Mongolia, the discovery would carry an even deeper, more profound weight. Genghis Khan is not merely a historical figure, he is the revered father of the nation, a symbol of unity, strength, and cultural identity. Locating his final resting place would be an event of immense national pride, a spiritual homecoming that would reaffirm a sacred connection to their most celebrated ancestor and solidify his legacy in the very land he loved. Yet, there is a powerful and compelling reason why the tomb may never be found, rooted in a profound cultural resistance that goes beyond the practical difficulties. For many Mongolians, the continued search for Genghis Khan's grave is not a noble scientific endeavor, but a profound desecration. He chose his hidden resting place for a reason, and to disturb it would be to violate his final wishes and potentially unleash a terrible curse, a belief that is still widely held. This cultural taboo is a significant factor that has hindered or outright stopped several expeditions, as local guides and communities often refuse to participate in activities they believe would anger the spirit of the great Khan. This creates a fascinating ethical dilemma that pits the global scientific desire for knowledge against the deeply held spiritual beliefs of a people. In a sense, the most successful protection for the tomb has not been the diverted river or the slain witnesses, but the enduring reverence of his descendants. The mystery persists not just because the burial was cleverly hidden, but because a part of the world actively believes it should remain so. The empty step, therefore, is not a void but a monument. It is a memorial to a different kind of power, one built not on grand constructions meant to awe through the ages, but on a final, absolute command for obscurity, a testament to the will of a man so powerful that his greatest legacy may be the silence he so masterfully engineered. But for all the power and mystery of Genghis Khan's unmarked grave, we now turn to a North American site where power was proclaimed loudly and publicly, etched into the very earth on a monumental scale. In the fertile Mississippi River bottomlands, just across from modern-day St. Louis, lies the remnants of the greatest prehistoric city north of Mexico, Cahokia. At its peak around 1100 AD, this was a bustling metropolis of perhaps 20,000 people, its skyline dominated by over 120 earthen mounds, including the colossal 100-foot-tall Monk's Mound, a structure that covers more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza. This was the heart of the Mississippian culture, a sophisticated society of farmers, artisans, and astronomers. Yet, for all its apparent civic grandeur, the darkest secrets of Cahokia's elite were buried within one of its smaller mounds. Designated Mound 72, this unassuming ridge held a shocking tableau of power and ritual violence that forever changed our understanding of this ancient civilization. The excavation of Mound 72 revealed not a single burial, but a complex, layered narrative of death and authority played out over time. The central story, the one that captivates and horrifies, revolves around the grave of a single high-status man. He was laid to rest on an exquisite platform made of 20,000 shell beads, arranged in the shape of a bird, possibly a falcon. This was no ordinary chief. This was a figure now known to archaeologists as the Birdman. But his majestic send-off was built upon a foundation of human sacrifice. Surrounding him were the remains of nearly 270 other individuals, and the evidence suggests that most did not go willingly to their graves. In one mass pit, the bodies of 53 young women, all between the ages of 15 and 25, were found arranged in rows, their bodies showing signs of having been strangled or bled to death in a single, coordinated event. In another, 4 men were interred, their heads and hands removed, a clear sign of ritual execution. These were not individuals who died of natural causes and were later buried together. This was a planned, systematic offering of human lives to accompany one man into the afterlife. The figure at the center of this grim ceremony, the birdman, presents the first great enigma. Who was he that his death demanded such a terrible tribute? The bird symbolism is the crucial clue. In the belief systems of many Native American cultures, birds, particularly raptors like falcons and hawks, were powerful spiritual beings associated with the upper world, the sun, and warrior prowess. The birdman was likely more than a political leader. He was probably a divine king or a paramount chief priest, a figure believed to embody a celestial power or to act as the primary intermediary between the people and the gods. His death would not have been seen as a simple political transition, but as a cosmic crisis. The stability of the world, the fertility of the crops, the very rising of the sun might have been thought to depend on the successful translation of his soul to the spirit world and the installation of a worthy successor. The mass sacrifice could have been viewed as a necessary act to provide him with a retinue in the afterlife, to send a powerful message of his authority to the spirit realm, or to replenish the spiritual energy lost from the world at his passing. The scale and nature of the sacrifices in Mound 72 force us to confront the complex and likely brutal social structure of Cahokia. A society capable of organizing the labor to build Monk's Mound was clearly one with a highly centralized authority and a stratified social hierarchy. The ability to summon dozens of young women from across the region and systematically execute them points to a level of coercive power that we rarely associate with pre-Columbian North America. These victims were likely not from Cahokia itself. Isotopic analysis of their teeth and bones indicates that many of them grew up in different regions, suggesting they may have been taken as tribute from subjugated communities or were captives from raids. Their sacrifice, then, served a dual purpose. It was a religious offering for the birdman, but it was also a terrifying display of the state's power, a public demonstration that the rulers of Cahokia held the ultimate authority over life and death, both cementing their spiritual dominance and quashing any thoughts of rebellion among their subjects or rivals. Yet, for all the dark clarity that Mound 72 provides about Cahokia's peak of power, the broader story of the city remains shrouded in mystery. We do not know what the people called themselves, as they left no written records. Their origin story is lost, and the reason for their eventual collapse and abandonment by the 14th century is still hotly debated. Did overpopulation and environmental degradation from such a concentrated society strip the land of its resources? Was there a prolonged drought that shattered the agricultural base and the people's faith in their rulers? Did internal social unrest, perhaps fueled by the very kind of elite violence seen in Mound 72, eventually lead to revolt and fragmentation? The city was abandoned centuries before European contact, leaving its grand mounds as silent sentinels. Mound 72, therefore, stands as a deeply paradoxical monument. It is our most vivid window into the pinnacle of Cahokia's power, revealing a society of immense spiritual complexity and terrifying political control. But it is also a grim premonition of that society's ultimate fragility, a reminder that even the most powerful and seemingly stable civilizations are built upon foundations that can, sometimes quite suddenly, crumble into dust and silence. Navigating from the grand mounds of the Mississippi, we set our sights across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, arriving at the tranquil shores of xi'an in French Polynesia. Here, far from the monumental earthworks of Cahokia, lies a burial practice of profound intimacy and mystery, one that speaks to the very soul of Polynesian culture. In the late 1960s and early 70s, archaeologists working in the Fahia region of the island made a startling discovery within the layers of a sacred marsh. They unearthed not simple graves but entire canoes beautifully crafted and intentionally submerged in the watery earth. These were not shipwrecks or abandoned vessels, they were coffins. Some of these dugout canoes, carved from single logs of sacred tu or breadfruit wood, contained the carefully placed skeletal remains of individuals, their final voyage ending not at sea, but in the stillness of a lagoon-side bog. The canoes themselves were accompanied by a trove of artifacts that clearly marked these individuals as people of immense status and importance. Laid beside the skeletons were finely polished tools made from precious basalt and shell, ornate fishing gear, and perhaps most tellingly, the remains of domesticated pigs and dogs, animals that represented significant wealth and were often reserved for the tables of chiefs. This was not a haphazard disposal of the dead. It was a deliberate, respectful, and lavish interment. The presence of these valuable goods indicates that the people buried here were likely high-ranking chiefs, revered navigators, or influential priests, individuals whose lives were integral to the community's identity and survival. The care taken in their burial suggests a deep-seated belief that their journey was not over and that they would need these provisions for what lay ahead. The central, haunting question that arises from this site is a simple one. Why a canoe and why in the water? To understand this, we must first grasp the unparalleled significance of the canoe in Polynesian society. For these extraordinary seafaring people, the canoe was not merely a mode of transport, it was the very engine of their civilization. It was the vessel that allowed them to conquer the world's largest ocean, discovering and settling thousands of islands across a triangle of water spanning millions of square miles. The canoe was a living entity imbued with mana spiritual power. It was a symbol of lineage, a tool of exploration, and a testament to human ingenuity in the face of the boundless sea. To be buried in one, therefore, was the highest possible honor. It was to be eternally connected to the source of their people's strength and identity. This practice is deeply intertwined with the Polynesian spiritual understanding of death and the afterlife. Many Polynesian cosmologies describe the soul's journey after death as a voyage across the sea to the legendary homeland of Hawaii, the ancestral source from which all life emerged. This was not just a mythical concept, it was a geographical memory of their origins, a real place their ancestors had sailed from generations before. By placing a body in a canoe and setting it in the water, the community was physically reenacting this spiritual journey. They were providing the deceased with a vessel to navigate the treacherous waters of the spirit world, to successfully complete that final, most important voyage back to the embrace of the ancestors. The marsh or lagoon acted as a symbolic launching point, a protected and sacred space that stood between the world of the living and the vast ocean of the dead. It was a practical solution that kept the body close for veneration, while its watery context fulfilled the cosmic requirement for a maritime departure. Yet, for all the sense this interpretation makes, the people of xi'an have left behind a silence that is as deep as the ocean they crossed. We do not know the specific name of the cultural group that initiated this tradition. While the site dates to a period before the more well-known Tahitian kingdoms consolidated power, we cannot say for certain if these were the direct ancestors of the modern islanders or a distinct, earlier population that was later absorbed. The exact, nuanced symbolic meaning of every ritual gesture is lost. What specific chants were spoken as the canoe was guided into the marsh? Were the canoes ever pushed out to sea, only to be washed back to shore and then interred as a sign that the spirit had been accepted? Did the specific arrangement of the artifacts, the tools laid to the left, the fishing spear to the right, hold a coded message about the individual's rank or achievements? These intimate details, the very poetry of the ritual, have evaporated with time. The canoes remain, their hollowed-out forms cradling the ghosts of renowned navigators who could read the stars and currents, but who took the final coordinates of their most sacred beliefs with them into the dark, quiet earth of the marsh. Now, let's journey from the sun-drenched Polynesian shores to the windswept, treeless archipelago of Orkney, off the northern coast of Scotland. Here, standing in stark, magnificent silence against a vast, dramatic sky, is Misho, a colossal, grass-covered mound that is one of the most sophisticated and enigmatic Neolithic structures in the world. Constructed around 2800 BC, this chambered tomb is centuries older than Stonehenge and even predates the Great Pyramid of Giza. From the outside, it appears as a huge man-made hill, an artificial earthen mound nearly 40 feet high and 115 feet in diameter, surrounded by a deep, water-filled ditch and an earthen bank. Its outward simplicity, however, belies a breathtaking feat of Stone Age engineering hidden within. To enter Misho is to undertake a journey, both physical and symbolic. You must crouch down and traverse a long, low, stone-lined passageway that stretches for over 36 feet into the heart of the mound. This tunnel is so precisely constructed that it is aligned to capture the setting sun of the winter solstice. For a few precious minutes each year, around the 21st of December, the dying rays of the sun plunge directly down this narrow corridor, illuminating the dark, central chamber in a blaze of golden light, a stunning demonstration of the builder's profound understanding of the solar cycle. Once you emerge from the passageway and stand upright, you find yourself in a square central chamber, a space of awe-inspiring craftsmanship. The walls rise over 12 feet to a magnificent corbelled vault, where each successive layer of stone slabs projects slightly inward until the roof is closed off. This architectural technique creates a powerful, cathedral-like space, all built without mortar, relying solely on the precise placement and immense weight of the stone to hold the structure stable for millennia. Off this main chamber are 3 smaller side cells, each one entered through a square opening high enough to require a step up. These cells are like small, private chapels, and it was within these secluded spaces that the fragmented remains of human bones were discovered, suggesting that Misho served as a final resting place, though the acidic soil has long since consumed the majority of the skeletal evidence. The sheer scale of the labor involved is almost unimaginable. It's estimated that the construction would have required a coordinated community effort over many years, moving and shaping an estimated 1,000 tons of stone and earth, all with only stone, bone, and wooden tools. 1,000 years after its construction, the tomb received a new group of visitors who left behind a completely different kind of mark. In the 12th century, a band of Norse crusaders, seeking shelter from a fierce winter storm, broke into the mound. Believing they had discovered an ancient burial how or burial mound, they carved their names and messages into the soft sandstone walls using runes, the ancient Germanic alphabet. Today, Misho boasts the single largest collection of runic inscriptions in the world, a fascinating and often humorous layer of graffiti left by these Viking interlopers. The messages range from the boastful, like Thorfinn Kolbeinsson carved these runes, high up to the practical, such as Ingigerd is the most beautiful of all women, a perhaps lovelorn declaration from a homesick warrior. One particularly intriguing inscription even claims crusaders broke into Misho. Håkon single-handedly carried treasure from this how, fueling enduring legends of hidden Norse loot. This Viking graffiti creates a bizarre and compelling palimpsest of history, where the solemn, sacred space of the Neolithic builders was later used as a temporary shelter and a message borne by a completely different culture, separating the two by a gulf of time greater than that which separates us from the Vikings themselves. This very separation points to the deepest and most enduring mystery of Misho, the identity and purpose of its original creators. We know them only by the distinctive pottery they left behind at other sites, calling them the grooved ware people. They were the same civilization that built the nearby stone circles of the Ring of Brodgar and the stones of Stenness, creating a vast, integrated ritual landscape across the Orkney mainland. But who were they? They left no written records and their language is utterly lost. The purpose of Misho itself remains a subject of intense debate. Was it primarily a tomb, a mausoleum for the bones of a ruling elite, a place where ancestors were venerated to legitimize the power of the living. The presence of human remains, however scant, certainly supports this. Yet, the incredible astronomical alignment and its connection to the surrounding monuments suggest a far more complex function. Many archaeologists now believe Misho was not just a tomb, but a temple of the dead and a sophisticated astronomical observatory. The winter solstice alignment was not a casual feature, it was central to the structure's design and meaning. The setting sun on the shortest day of the year would have represented the symbolic death of the sun, its light plunging into the heart of a chamber associated with death and ancestors. This could have been a powerful ritual moment, a ceremony to ensure the sun's rebirth and the return of the light and warmth needed for survival. The very location of Misho within the Orkney landscape adds another layer of intrigue. It is positioned with a clear line of sight to the other great Neolithic monuments, forming a massive ceremonial complex. This suggests that the tomb was part of a cyclical ritual journey, perhaps used only at specific times of the year, like the solstice, for ceremonies that connected the living community with their ancestors and the cosmic forces they believed governed their world. The act of entering the long, dark passageway, symbolically leaving the world of the living behind and emerging into the illuminated central chamber, could have been a transformative experience, a ritual reenactment of death and rebirth. The identities of the people deemed important enough to be interred in such a place are forever lost, their names erased by time. Were they chieftains, priestesses, or entire revered lineages? We may never know. Misho stands as a silent, stoic testament to a lost civilization's intellectual and spiritual achievements, a monument that was simultaneously a gateway to the underworld, a calendar marking the rhythms of the cosmos, and a permanent anchor for the souls of the ancestors in the landscape of the living. We now journey from the monumental tombs of settled societies to the sprawling, open grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, where an entirely different kind of cultural force was on the move. Emerging from the Pontic-Caspian steppe north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea around 3300 BC were the Yamaya people. They were not city builders. They left behind no grand temples or palaces. Their legacy was inscribed not in stone but in the earth itself, in a signature burial practice that would ripple across a continent. Their name, Yamaya, even comes from the Russian word for pit, and it perfectly describes their defining funerary tradition. The ochre-covered dead laid to rest in deep, rectangular pits, over which they erected a circular mound known as a kurgan. These kurgans dot the steppe landscape like silent, grassy bells, marking the passage of people whose entire lives were shaped by mobility. A typical Yamaya burial reveals a great deal about their world. The deceased was almost always placed in a crouched or flexed position on their side, their knees drawn up towards their chest. This posture might have symbolized sleep, or perhaps a return to the womb of the earth, ready for a rebirth. But the most striking feature is the generous use of red ochre, a powdered iron oxide pigment, sprinkled over the body. This crimson dust, the color of blood and life, was likely a powerful symbol of regeneration, a magical substance intended to restore vitality to the deceased in the next world or to protect them on their journey. The grave goods were practical, reflecting a nomadic pastoralist life. You would find ornamented pottery, often with cord-impressed designs, stone battle axes, flint tools, and occasionally ornaments made of silver or gold. But the most telling inclusions are the remains of animals, sheep, cattle, and critically, horses. These were not just food for the journey, they were the very foundation of Yamaya power and identity, the key to understanding their incredible expansion. And their expansion was nothing short of revolutionary. Beginning around 3000 BC, something triggered a massive westward migration out of the steppe. For decades, archaeologists debated the nature of this spread, but recent advances in ancient DNA analysis have provided a stunningly clear, and for some, startling answer. Genetic studies have revealed a dramatic genetic shift in Europe around this time. The DNA of the Neolithic farmers who had built settlements like Stonehenge and the long houses of Central Europe was suddenly and overwhelmingly supplemented, and in many places replaced by a new genetic signature, one that originated directly with the Yamaya herders from the steppe. This was not a subtle cultural exchange. This was a massive, pulsed migration of people. The evidence suggests that Yamaya-related ancestry swept across Europe, contributing a significant portion of the genetic makeup of virtually all subsequent European populations, especially in the northern and central regions. They didn't just bring new genes, they brought a new way of life that would dominate the continent for millennia to come. So, what was the engine behind this dramatic demographic upheaval? The secret to the Yamaya's success appears to have been a powerful technological and social package that gave them an unprecedented advantage. Two innovations were absolutely central: the domestication of the horse and the invention of the wheeled cart. The Yamaya are among the strongest candidates for being the first people to truly master horseback riding. This was a transformation as profound as the invention of the internet. For the first time in human history, a person could travel vast distances with incredible speed, manage massive herds of livestock across the open range, and project military power with a mobility that foot-bound farmers could scarcely comprehend. The wheel gave them the wagon, a mobile home on the plains. This combination of horse and wagon liberated them from the river valleys and fertile patches that had constrained earlier societies. They could now exploit the vast, rich grasslands of the steppe, a resource that had been largely untapped. This new pastoral economy, based on herds of sheep, cattle, and horses, was highly productive and generated a surplus that could support a growing population, likely fueling the need for further expansion as climate fluctuations or social pressures pushed them westward into the farming communities of old Europe. This brings us to one of the most significant and still debated mysteries in all of archaeology: the Yamaya's profound connection to the spread of Indo-European languages. This vast language family, which includes English, Spanish, Hindi, Persian, and Russian, among hundreds of others, blankets the globe today. For centuries, linguists have searched for its origins, its Proto-Indo-European homeland. The Yamaya, with their rapid and far-reaching migrations, fit the profile of the original Indo-European speakers almost perfectly. The steppe hypothesis posits that as Yamaya populations moved, they brought their language with them, and over generations, it evolved and splintered into the diverse Indo-European languages we know. The linguistic evidence is compelling. For instance, words for wheel, axle, and wagon appear reconstructed in the Proto-Indo-European vocabulary, matching the Yamaya's technological toolkit. Furthermore, words for horse, sheep, and cattle are also central, perfectly aligning with their pastoralist economy. It seems that the Yamaya did not just change Europe's genetic makeup, they may have fundamentally rewired its linguistic landscape, laying the groundwork for the primary languages of the Western world. Yet, for a people who had such an outsized impact, their own origins remain curiously opaque. The puzzle of where the Yamaya themselves came from is still being pieced together from fragmentary evidence. They seem to have evolved from an earlier blending of two distinct steppe cultures: the hunter-gatherers of the Dnieper-Donetsk region and a wave of migrants from the south, possibly from the Caucasus, who brought with them a more advanced toolkit and perhaps the first seeds of the pastoralist lifestyle. The reasons for their explosive expansion are also multifaceted. It was likely not a single cause, but a perfect storm of factors. A sudden climate shift around that time may have made the eastern steppe drier, pushing populations westward toward more hospitable land. Their new mobile economy gave them both the means and the motive to move. Some of their encounters with the settled European farmers were probably violent, as evidenced by a rise in fortified settlements and the inclusion of weaponry in graves. In other cases, it may have been a slower process of infiltration, trade, and intermarriage, where their more resilient and mobile lifestyle eventually came to dominate. The Yamaya pit graves, therefore, are far more than simple tombs. They are the starting pistols of a demographic Big Bang. The humble-looking origin points for a wave of migration that reshaped the human story, leaving behind a legacy written in our very genes and on the tongues of billions of people today, all emanating from the deep, ochre-covered pits of the nomadic steppe. Moving deeper into the world of the ancient Maya, we leave the public spectacles of the sacred cenote and arrive at a city that represents the pinnacle of their intellectual and artistic achievement, Palenque. Nestled in the lush, mist-shrouded foothills of Chiapas, Mexico, this city feels like a place of quiet contemplation, its elegant white limestone buildings adorned with some of the most beautiful and intricate carvings in the entire Maya world. And at its heart, crowning a towering stepped pyramid, is the Temple of the Inscriptions. For centuries, this temple was known for the long, hieroglyphic text running down the inner walls of its summit structure, a puzzle that seemed to hold the key to the city's history. But the temple's greatest secret lay not in the inscriptions on the walls, but deep within the pyramid itself. In 1952, after 4 years of meticulous excavation, the Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz made a discovery that would rewrite Maya history. He found a hidden stairway deliberately sealed with rubble descending from the temple floor deep into the heart of the pyramid. At the bottom, he broke through a stone wall and entered a vaulted crypt where he encountered a massive, intricately carved stone sarcophagus lid. Lifting that lid revealed the skeleton of a man adorned in jade finery, his face covered by a mosaic jade mask. This was the tomb of Xi'an Pakal, known today as Pakal the Great, the most famous ruler of Palenque. The discovery was monumental, proving for the first time that the Maya built pyramids as royal tombs, just like the Egyptians. Pakal's tomb is so spectacular that it can easily overshadow the rest of the temple complex, but the story of Palenque's elite does not begin or end with him. The Temple of the Inscriptions is not a solitary monument. It is part of a dense funerary landscape, a dynastic mausoleum designed to house multiple generations of Pakal's line. Within the same pyramidal platform that contains Pakal's tomb, archaeologists have discovered other, smaller crypts and burial chambers. These are the final resting places of other high-ranking nobles, individuals who are clearly important enough to be interred in the shadow of their great king, yet whose identities present their own tangled web of mysteries. Some of these subsidiary tombs contained rich offerings, jade, pottery, shells, and most crucially, inscriptions. The names and titles of these individuals are recorded in the classic Maya script, a complex system of glyphs that combines logograms representing whole words with syllabic signs representing sounds. For decades, many of these inscriptions were unreadable, their meanings locked away because the context of these lesser nobles was not well understood. They were ghosts with names, their carved identities staring back at us without a story. The process of deciphering these identities has been a slow, painstaking puzzle, one that continues to this day. The breakthrough in understanding Maya writing, which really gathered steam in the latter part of the 20th century, has been like turning on a light in a dark room. Epigraphers, the specialists who study ancient inscriptions, have gradually learned to read the stories of Palenque's aristocracy. They can now identify names like Lady Yol Icknal, a powerful queen who ruled in her own right before Pakal's time, and Canbiolam, one of Pakal's sons. But for every name clearly linked to the main royal line, there are others that are more obscure. A noble might be identified by a title like Sajul, which means a subordinate lord or a regional governor, or Yajor Kaok, meaning he of the fire, a title often associated with military commanders. We might know a person's title and their name glyph, but the full narrative of their life, their specific achievements, their parentage, or the nature of their relationship to Pakal remains frustratingly incomplete. A glyph might be partially eroded by time, or it might use a rare, poorly understood combination of signs. In some cases, an individual might be mentioned only once, in a single cryptic reference within a much longer text, leaving us with a name but no biography, a title without a face. This forces us to confront the complex and often opaque structure of the Palenque court. Pakle's long reign of 68 years was not sustained by one man alone. It was upheld by an intricate web of familial alliances, loyal bureaucrats, and powerful military leaders. The people buried near him were undoubtedly key players in this political machine, but their exact roles are often a matter of educated guesswork. Was the woman in the ornate tomb adjacent to his beloved wife, a politically important secondary spouse from a powerful allied city, or perhaps a revered mother? Was the man buried with a cache of obsidian spear points a war captain who led Palenque's armies to victory, or was he a royal bodyguard entrusted with the king's personal safety? The artifacts in their graves provide clues but not definitive answers. A collection of fine weaving tools might suggest a noblewoman, but it doesn't tell us if she was a master artisan overseeing textile production or if the tools were symbolic of her role in household management. The presence of stingray spines used in the painful ritual of bloodletting indicates a person of high religious status, but was he the high priest himself or a member of the royal family who performed these rites? The ongoing work at Palenque is a race not just against time and the elements, but against the very limitations of our current knowledge. Every new season of excavation and every fresh analysis of the thousands of glyphs from the site has the potential to connect a name to a story. A recently deciphered verb might reveal that a certain noble was not just a Sajul, but a Sajul who conquered a rival town, transforming him from a faceless official into a specific historical actor. The use of non-invasive techniques like LiDAR is revealing entire new structures and burial complexes in the jungle around the city's core, suggesting that the royal necropolis is far more extensive than we once believed. Each new tomb discovered offers another data point, another name to add to the growing family tree of Palenque's aristocracy. Yet for all this progress, a profound silence remains. We can map the dynastic sequence, we can recite the names and titles, but the personal motivations, the private loyalties, and the whispered conversations that shaped the court of Pakle the Great are lost forever. The Temple of the Inscriptions, therefore, stands as a dual monument. It is both a brilliant archive of a mighty civilization and a poignant reminder of the intimate human stories that decay into dust long before the stone carvings fade. But from the grand tombs of kings and the cliffside burials of chieftains, we now journey to a space that offers a profoundly different and in many ways more universal perspective on mortality. Tucked away in the small town of Sedlec in the Czech Republic lies a small, unassuming chapel. From the outside, it appears to be a modest, Gothic-style religious building, but to descend its steps into the lower chapel is to enter one of the most startling and thought-provoking spaces on Earth. The Sedlec Ossuary, a chapel decorated almost entirely with human bones. The scale is almost incomprehensible. The remains of an estimated 40,000 to 70,000 individuals have been artistically arranged to form every element of its macabre decor. A massive chandelier containing at least one of every bone in the human body hangs dramatically from the center of the nave. Garlands of skulls and femurs drape from the vaulted ceilings. Monstrous pyramids of stacked bones fill entire corners of the crypt, and 4 colossal bell-shaped mounds of bones occupy each of the chapel's corners. Even the coat of arms of the aristocratic Schwarzenberg family, who own the property, is rendered in grisly detail, complete with a bone-carved raven pecking at the eye socket of a severed Turkish skull. This is not a scene of desecration, but one of breathtaking, if unsettling, artistry, raising profound questions about how we remember the dead and what we choose to do with the physical aftermath of our shared humanity. To understand how this place came to be, we must go back to the 13th century and a simple abbot named Heidenreich. Returning from a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, he brought back a small jar of soil from Golgotha, the hill where Jesus was crucified. He sprinkled this consecrated earth over the cemetery of the Sedlec monastery, instantly transforming it into one of the most desired final resting places in all of Central Europe. People from across Bohemia, Austria, Bavaria, and Poland desperately wanted to be buried in this holy ground, believing it would ensure their salvation. For centuries, the cemetery grew, but its capacity was catastrophically tested by two of the most devastating events in European history. First came the Black Death in the mid-14th century, which wiped out nearly a third of Europe's population, flooding the cemetery with tens of thousands of victims in just a few years. Then, in the early 15th century, the Hussite Wars, a violent religious conflict between Catholic and Protestant reformers, ravaged the region, adding countless more casualties to the already overflowing burial grounds. The sheer volume of death was overwhelming. The sacred soil of Sedlec became a vast, layered mass grave, its identity as a coveted individual resting place subsumed by its grim new role as a repository for the anonymous dead of plague and war. By the 18th century, the cemetery was simply untenable. In an effort to make space for new burials and to reorganize the chaotic jumble of remains, the task of exhuming the older skeletons and moving their bones into the new ossuary chapel began. This was a common practice across a crowded Europe. When cemetery space was scarce, skeletons would be respectfully disinterred, and their bones would be cleaned, whitened with lime, and neatly stacked in a charnel house or ossuary. It was a practical solution rooted in a deep-seated Christian theology that viewed the body as a mere temporary vessel for the immortal soul. The physical bones were not seen with horror, but as a promise of the resurrection, awaiting the day when they would be miraculously reassembled. The orderly storage of these bones was an act of pious care, a way of keeping the community of the faithful together until the end of days. For decades, the bones in the Sedlec ossuary were simply stacked in functional, if grim, piles. The true transformation and the source of its modern fame came from a most unexpected artist in the 19th century. In 1870, the Schwarzenberg family hired a local woodcarver named František Rindt to bring a sense of order to the ossuary's chaotic heaps of bones. What Rindt created, however, was far beyond simple organization. Using the bleached remains of these tens of thousands of anonymous individuals as his medium, he embarked on a project of macabre genius. His vision was to use the bones not just as relics, but as architectural and artistic elements. He and his team meticulously sorted, cleaned, and then wired together the bones to form the chapel's now iconic features. The Great Chandelier is his masterpiece, a stunningly symmetrical creation that seems to both celebrate life, containing its full skeletal blueprint, and mock its fleeting nature. The garlands, the chalices, the candelabras, and the Schwarzenberg coat of arms all speak to a bizarre fusion of sacred reverence and Gothic horror. Rindt's work transformed the ossuary from a somber storage facility into a profound and unsettling work of art, forcing every visitor to confront the sheer materiality of human existence, the literal building blocks of life rearranged into decorations for the dead. This artistic intervention deepens the site's central mystery from a simple question of origin to a far more complex philosophical puzzle. We know why the bones are there: plague, war, and the crowding of holy ground. The deeper, more haunting mystery is what this place means for our relationship with mortality itself. Is this a place of profound disrespect, a grotesque spectacle where the remains of 40,000 souls have been turned into a tourist attraction? Or is it, in fact, one of the most powerful and honest memento mori, a reminder of death ever created? By rendering death so explicitly, so artistically, and on such an immense scale, the Sedlec ossuary strips away the euphemisms and the comfortable distance we place between ourselves and our inevitable end. Every skull, once unique, is now part of a collective, anonymous whole. The noble and the peasant, the warrior and the plague victim, all are equalized in this bone-white democracy. The artistry does not seek to hide death, but to engage with it directly, to find a strange and terrible beauty in its universal truth. It challenges us to see not a collection of individuals, but the sheer force of human mortality as a historical and biological phenomenon. The origins of the bones are a story of medieval piety and historical catastrophe, but the meaning of the ossuary is a story that is still being written by every person who walks down its steps, looks upon the chandelier, and is forced to remember that this, in the end, is the fate we all share. Now we travel even further back in time, to the steamy, swampy heartland of the Mexican Gulf Coast, where the very foundations of Mesoamerican civilization were laid. This is the world of the Olmec, a culture so ancient and influential that they are often called the mother culture of the region. Their greatest center, La Venta, rose to prominence around 900 BC, a city of earth and imagination that must have seemed like a miracle to those who saw it. Towering over the flat, tropical landscape was the Great Pyramid, a colossal, fluted cone of clay and earth rising over 100 feet high. This was not just the tallest structure of its time in Mesoamerica, it was a man-made mountain, an axis mundi connecting the earthly realm with the heavens above. Surrounding it was a vast ceremonial complex aligned precisely on a north-south axis, a sacred precinct filled with plazas, platforms, and enigmatic sculptures carved from the region's distinctive basalt. The sheer scale of labor required to build La Venta, to haul immense stones from quarries dozens of miles away without the wheel or draft animals, speaks of a society with a powerful, centralized authority, capable of organizing thousands of people for a collective spiritual vision. Within this sacred landscape, the Olmec left behind clues to their beliefs, not in grand royal tombs, but in deeply hidden offerings buried beneath the clay floors of their plazas. The most famous of these is offering number 4, a breathtaking tableau discovered in 1955. In a meticulously arranged pit, archaeologists uncovered 16 male figures carved from precious green serpentine and jade, all standing in a semicircle as if in a hushed meeting. They face 6 upright stone celts, polished axe-head symbols of authority, and directly in front of them lies a solitary, unique figure made of a different reddish stone. This scene is not a random collection of valuables, it is a frozen moment, a snapshot of a ceremony, or perhaps a council of elders acknowledging a leader. The materials themselves tell a story of power and reach. The jade and serpentine had to be imported from distant sources hundreds of miles away, indicating that the Olmec elites controlled vast and sophisticated trade networks. Yet, the meaning of this silent congregation remains one of Mesoamerica's most tantalizing riddles. Who are these 16 men? Are they ancestral spirits, revered chiefs, or priests? And who is the lone figure of red stone they all face? Is he a god, a deified king, or a sacrificial victim? The offering provides no written answers, only a powerful, wordless narrative waiting for its translator. This profound mystery is compounded by the greatest enigma of Olmec archaeology, the missing kings themselves. We know the Olmec had powerful rulers. Their most iconic legacy is the series of colossal stone heads, 17 of which have been found at sites like La Venta and San Lorenzo. These massive basalt sculptures, some weighing over 20 tons, depict helmeted individuals with distinct, fleshy faces, broad noses, and full lips, each one a clear, individual portrait of a specific ruler. They are monuments of immense ego and authority, meant to project the unchallengeable power of an individual for generations. You look at these heads and you see the face of a king. Yet, when we search for the physical remains of these very rulers, we find almost nothing. Despite decades of intensive excavation, no definitive, lavishly furnished royal tomb, nothing akin to Pakal's crypt at Palenque or the Lord of Sapon's chamber, has ever been conclusively identified at any major Olmec site. The rulers who commanded the carving and transportation of these immense portraits seem to have vanished from the earth without a trace. Where, then, did they bury their kings? This question strikes at the very heart of our understanding of early social complexity in the Americas. One compelling theory is that the Olmec royal tombs are not lost, but are hiding in plain sight, integrated into the very structures we have already found. Some archaeologists propose that the massive pyramid at La Venta is not just a platform for temples, but could itself be a gigantic burial mound, a kingly tomb on a scale so monumental that the ruler's body lies somewhere deep within its earthen core, forever fused with the sacred mountain he commanded to be built. Excavating such a structure to find out would mean essentially destroying it, a sacrifice the archaeological community is unwilling to make. Another possibility is that the most sacred royal burials were not in the city center at all, but in secret, secluded locations, perhaps on islands in the surrounding swamps or in caves considered portals to the underworld. These locations would have been chosen specifically for their seclusion, to protect the king's remains and his powerful spirit from disturbance, making their discovery a matter of incredible luck and perseverance. The absence of these tombs forces us to reconsider the nature of Olmec kingship. Perhaps their rulers were not interred with vast hoards of personal wealth like the later Maya lords. Maybe their power was expressed differently, vested not in material accumulation but in their role as the primary conduits to the spirit world. Their burial, then, might have been a more subtle, symbolic act, their bodies placed in simple tombs whose real power lay in the elaborate ceremonies that accompanied their death rather than in the goods left behind. Or perhaps we simply have not yet recognized an Olmec royal tomb when we have seen one. The offerings, like the group of 16 figures, might be the key. What if these intricate arrangements are not just symbolic scenes, but are literal maps pointing to the location of a nearby royal burial, a cryptic code left by the Olmec to guide the initiated? The truth is, the origins of Mesoamerican kingship, that moment when a single individual first claimed the right to rule as a semi-divine being, are buried with the Olmec kings. Their colossal heads stand as imperious, silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of their own mortality and challenging us to keep looking, to keep digging, for the graves of the mothers and fathers of an entire cultural tradition. Leaving behind the bone-lined chapel of Sedlec and the colossal heads of the Olmec, our journey now takes us to the highlands of northern Ethiopia, to a city whose very name evokes a lost age of empire and legend. This is Axum, the capital of a kingdom that rivaled Rome, Persia, and Byzantium, a place where faith and power were carved into the sky itself. The first thing that strikes you here are the stellar monolithic granite obelisks, some soaring over 100 feet tall, piercing the African sky. They are not just markers, they are statements of celestial ambition, immense stone needles that seem to stitch the earth to the heavens. But while these towering monuments proclaim a kingdom's glory for all to see, the true heart of Axumite royalty lies hidden in the darkness below, in an uncharted necropolis of underground tombs that guard the secrets of a dynasty which helped shape the ancient world. The architecture of these subterranean complexes is a masterpiece of stonework and symbolism. The most iconic is the Tomb of the False Door, a name that perfectly captures its central enigma. Its facade is dominated by a massive, intricately carved stone slab that looks exactly like a monumental doorway, complete with a representation of a lock. Yet this door does not open. It is a solid, impassable block of stone. This was a powerful spiritual concept, a symbolic portal for the soul of the deceased king to pass between the world of the living and the realm of the ancestors. Behind this false front lies a labyrinth of multi-chambered vaults, built with enormous, precisely fitted granite blocks, a technique that echoes distant civilizations yet is uniquely Axumite. Another spectacular example is the tomb traditionally attributed to King Caleb, a 6th century ruler renowned for his piety and military campaigns across the Red Sea. His supposed resting place is a palatial underground mansion, featuring a central chamber supported by massive pillars and surrounded by side rooms that once held a king's ransom in grave goods. The sheer scale of these constructions speaks of a centralized state with the power to command master stonemasons and thousands of laborers, all dedicated to creating eternal houses for their godlike kings. To understand why Axum invested such incredible effort in these tombs, one must appreciate its historical stature. For nearly 1,000 years, from the 1st to the 8th centuries AD, Axum was the nexus of a vast trading network. Its merchant ships plied the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, while its camel caravans snaked across the desert. This was the empire that controlled the source of ivory, frankincense, myrrh, and most importantly, gold, making it an economic superpower whose currency was accepted from Alexandria to India. Then, in the 4th century, a monumental spiritual shift occurred. Under King Azana, Axum became one of the very first kingdoms in the world to officially adopt Christianity, decades before the Roman Empire. This conversion created a profound schism in royal burial practices. The later Christian kings, like Caleb, were likely interred in simple, pious graves, perhaps in the shadows of the great monasteries they founded. But this raises an urgent, unresolved question for archaeologists. Where are the tombs of Axum's earliest pre-Christian rulers, the mightiest emperors, the ones who oversaw the kingdom's expansion and the erection of the largest stelae, must have been buried with pagan splendor rivaling any pharaoh. Their tombs would be the richest of all, filled with golden artifacts, sacrificial offerings, and inscriptions in the still partially understood Jez script that could unlock the origins of the empire itself. Yet, these royal sepulchres have eluded every search, their locations a secret kept by the silent, rocky hills. This search inevitably leads to the greatest and most tantalizing figure in Axumite lore, the Queen of Sheba. Known locally as Meghda, her story is a vibrant tapestry woven from threads of history, the Bible, and the Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's national epic. The legend tells of her famous journey to Jerusalem to test the wisdom of King Solomon, a meeting that, according to Ethiopian tradition, resulted in a son named Menelik. This son would later travel to Jerusalem himself and return to Axum with the legendary Ark of the Covenant, establishing the Solomonic dynasty that Ethiopian emperors would claim for millennia. The historical reality is complex. There likely was a powerful queen who ruled a wealthy Sabaean kingdom in the general region around the 10th century BC, but direct archaeological evidence linking her specifically to the city of Axum remains elusive. The connection is a powerful national narrative, a foundational myth that ties the kingdom's identity to biblical glory. This blend of history and myth casts a long shadow over the Axumite necropolis. Could one of those undiscovered pre-Christian tombs belong to her? Is the mother of the nation's founding dynasty lying in a forgotten, treasure-filled chamber beneath the fields where farmers now plow? The search for her tomb is more than an archaeological dig. It is a quest for a spiritual and national origin point. The ongoing work in Axum, therefore, is a delicate dance between science and legend. Modern archaeologists use ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies to scan the vast fields surrounding the known stelae parks, searching for the telltale void of an unchambered tomb. Every potential signal is a promise, a chance to find the burial of a pre-Christian emperor that could illuminate Axum's shadowy formative centuries. Yet the search is fraught with cultural sensitivity. For the Ethiopian Orthodox faithful, Axum is the spiritual heart of the nation, the home of the Ark, and a living sacred landscape. Excavation is not merely a scientific exercise, it is an interaction with deeply held belief. The tombs that have been found with their false doors and pillared halls are grand, but they feel like the closing chapters of a story. The opening chapters, the tombs of the kings who built the first stelae and transformed a trading post into an empire, are still missing. Until one of those early royal vaults is found, the origins of Axum's royal lineage remain half in shadow, a mystery buried under tons of earth and stone, waiting for the day when a sealed, true door is finally discovered and a lost king steps back into the light of history. Crossing the Irish Sea, we arrive in a green and ancient land where the very stones seem to whisper of a time when the world was new. Long before Celtic warriors or medieval monks set foot on this island, a different people arrived, and their legacy is written not on parchment but in granite and slate. Scattered across the Irish landscape are some of the oldest surviving structures on Earth, the enigmatic portal tombs and court cairns of the Neolithic period. To stand before a portal tomb, like the magnificent Paulnabrone in the stark beauty of the Burren, is to witness a feat of engineering that seems to defy its own age. The defining feature is the colossal capstone, a single massive slab of rock weighing tens of tons, perched at a dramatic angle on 2 or 3 towering portal stones. This creates a chamber that is both tomb and landmark, a stark silhouette against the sky that has weathered over 5,000 years of storms. These were not simple piles of rock, they were carefully designed structures. The portal stones framed a symbolic entrance, often facing a specific direction, while the entire chamber was frequently covered by a large mound of stones and earth, known as a cairn, turning the standing stones we see today into merely the skeletal framework of a much larger, more imposing monument. The architectural cousins of the portal tombs, the court cairns, present an even more complex vision of the afterlife. These are sprawling, communal tombs where the architecture itself seems to orchestrate a ritual journey. The name comes from their most distinctive feature, a semicircular, open-air courtyard paved with stones, leading to a narrow, tunnel-like entrance. This courtyard was not a burial space itself, but a gathering area for the living, a sacred arena where ceremonies could be performed before the remains were taken into the darkness of the tomb. Beyond the entrance lay a series of burial chambers, often arranged like the petals of a clover leaf, all nestled under a single, long cairn. This design, with its clear separation between the public court and the private burial chambers, hints at a highly structured funerary ritual, a performance of death that involved the entire community. The effort involved was staggering. Quarrying and transporting these megaliths without metal tools or wheeled vehicles required an immense, coordinated communal effort, a powerful testament to the shared beliefs that bound these early farming communities together. So who were the people who undertook this monumental labor? They were the first farmers of Ireland, a population that arrived by boat around 4000 BC, bringing with them wheat, barley, and domesticated animals like cattle and sheep. They cleared the dense forests to create fields and established settled communities, a revolutionary shift from the mobile, hunter-gatherer lifestyle of the Mesolithic people who came before them. This new way of life, tied to the cycles of sowing and reaping, fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with the land and with death itself. The investment in permanent, massive tombs suggests a deep need to claim the landscape, to anchor their community to a specific place for generations. The tombs were more than just graves, they were territorial markers, declarations of a lineage's right to the land they farmed. They were a permanent address for the ancestors, whose spirits were believed to watch over the living and perhaps even influence the fertility of the soil upon which their survival depended. The mysteries carved into these stones deepen when we consider the intricate and often unsettling rituals that took place within them. Excavations of tombs like Paulnabrone have revealed that burial was not a single event, but a long, multi-stage process. The chambers contain the disarticulated and commingled bones of many individuals, men, women, and children from across multiple generations. The bones are often sorted, with skulls grouped together in one area and long bones in another. This presents a clear picture of what archaeologists call excarnation. Bodies were likely first placed in the tomb in a complete state, or perhaps left exposed to the elements or in a temporary grave to decompose. After the flesh had decayed, the community would return to the tomb. The bones would be carefully collected, rearranged, and sometimes even painted with ochre. Older bones might be pushed to the sides to make way for the newly deceased. This practice suggests a belief that the soul's journey to the afterlife was a gradual process, and that the final rest of the bones within the communal tomb was the culmination of that journey, integrating the individual fully into the world of the ancestors. Adding another layer of sophistication to these sites is the discovery of precise astronomical alignments. Many of these tombs are oriented to capture the rays of the sun or moon on significant days of the year. A portal tomb might be aligned to the rising sun on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, when the rebirth of the sun was a cause for hope and celebration. A court cairn's entrance might face the equinox sunrise, marking a time of balance between light and dark. These alignments were not accidental. They prove that the tomb builders were meticulous observers of the sky, integrating the cycles of the cosmos into the very architecture of death. The tomb became a cosmic clock, a place where the living could gather to witness the sun's light penetrating the dark chamber of the ancestors, perhaps symbolically recharging the spirits within or demonstrating a profound connection between the cycle of human life, the agricultural year, and the eternal motions of the heavens. Ultimately, the most profound and unanswerable puzzle lies in the origins of the specific spiritual beliefs that drove these people to such incredible acts of labor and devotion. We can see the physical evidence of their rituals, but the mythology that gave them meaning is lost to us. What stories did they tell about the gods who governed life and death? What did they believe awaited them in the world beyond the massive capstone? Did they see the tomb as a womb for rebirth or as a fortress protecting the ancestors from malevolent forces? The transition from the simple, often individual, burials of the hunter-gatherers to these colossal communal tombs represents a seismic shift in human consciousness. It speaks to the emergence of a complex society with a shared ideology powerful enough to command the labor of hundreds for a project that would not benefit them in their own lifetime, but for their descendants and their ancestors. These silent, stoic stones are the earliest chapters of Ireland's story, erected by a people whose names and language have vanished without a trace, leaving behind only these magnificent, perplexing portals as a permanent question about the nature of belief itself. Yet another echo from the vast steppe now rises, this time from the sun-baked grasslands of modern Ukraine and southern Russia. Here, around 2500 BC, a new and enigmatic culture emerged from the shadow of the Yamaya, distinguished not by their mounds but by what they built beneath them. This is the catacomb culture, a name that perfectly encapsulates their unique and haunting approach to the afterlife. While they continued the Yamaya tradition of raising kurgans over their dead, they engineered a far more complex subterranean world. Their tombs were not simple pits, they were architectural marvels carved into the earth. A deep, vertical shaft acting as a formal entrance would descend several feet into the ground. At its bottom, the diggers would hollow out one or more horizontal chambers or catacombs branching off to the sides. The deceased would then be carefully laid to rest in these dark, secluded rooms, often in a tightly flexed position on their side, as if in a final, eternal slumber. The entrance shaft would then be meticulously filled with earth, sealing the chamber and creating a hidden, private crypt beneath the public monument of the kurgan. This shift from a simple pit to a multi-roomed underground house for the dead represents a profound evolution in spiritual thought, suggesting a belief in a more elaborate and perhaps more personalized journey for the soul. The relationship between the catacomb culture and their Yamaya predecessors is one of the great puzzles of the Eurasian Bronze Age. Were the catacomb people direct descendants of the Yamaya, a branch of the same family tree that simply developed new cultural expressions over a few centuries? Or did they represent a new wave of migrants, perhaps from the Caucasus region, who moved into Yamaya territory, bringing their distinct burial practices with them and either absorbing or displacing the earlier population? The archaeological record presents a mixed picture. There is clear continuity in some areas, like the overall practice of kurgan burial and a shared pastoralist economy. Yet the dramatic change in tomb architecture, along with distinct styles of pottery and new types of metal artifacts, points toward a significant cultural shift. It is possible that this was not a simple replacement but a complex fusion, where incoming ideas and people blended with a local Yamaya base, creating a new hybrid identity on the steppe. Their origins remain clouded, a testament to the dynamic and often turbulent interactions that constantly reshaped the ancient world. What truly brings the catacomb culture to life, however, are the astonishing and sometimes chilling artifacts they left with their dead. Among the most evocative finds are the carved stone stelae, which were often erected on the surface of the kurgans. These are not the impersonal pillars of earlier times. Many are anthropomorphic, carved with subtle features that suggest a human form. T-shaped tops might symbolize heads, with simple grooves indicating eyes, a nose, and sometimes even a mouth. Below, lines carved into the stone could represent necklaces, weapons, or belts, transforming the stone into a stylized portrait of the deceased, a permanent guardian for the tomb. Even more telling are the clay models of wheeled vehicles found in some graves. These are not toys, they are miniature versions of the wagons that defined steppe life. Placing a model wagon in a tomb was a powerful symbolic act, ensuring that the deceased had the means for transportation in the afterlife, a continuation of the mobile, pastoral existence that was central to their identity. The rituals surrounding catacomb burials reveal a society deeply engaged with the spiritual world, and some of their practices are startlingly intimate. Archaeologists have found evidence of mortuary masks crafted from materials like clay or organic substances that have since decayed. These masks were placed over the faces of the deceased, perhaps to create a permanent, idealized visage for the spirit, or to protect the living from the powerful and potentially dangerous gaze of the dead. But the most extreme and thought-provoking practice is that of trepanation, the deliberate drilling or scraping of a hole into the human skull. Several catacomb skeletons have been found with clear, healed trepanation holes, proving that the individual survived the procedure. Why would they do this? The reasons were likely multifaceted. In some cases, it may have been a primitive medical attempt to treat severe headaches, epilepsy, or brain injuries sustained in conflict. Yet, in a culture so focused on the afterlife, the procedure almost certainly held a profound spiritual dimension. They may have believed that opening the skull could release evil spirits causing illness or mental distress, or perhaps even facilitate a direct connection with the gods, creating a literal portal for the soul. The fact that people survived this incredible ordeal speaks to a surprising level of practical anatomical knowledge and post-operative care, all embedded within a world-view where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual was as thin as the bone of the skull itself. This remarkable culture, with its underground chambers and complex rituals, did not last forever. By the middle of the 2nd millennium BC, the distinct catacomb culture faded from the archaeological record, its traditions replaced by those of new peoples like the Esrubnaya or timber grave culture. The reasons for their disappearance are as debated as their origins. Some researchers point to climatic changes, as the steppe may have become drier, putting pressure on their pastoral way of life and forcing populations to move or fragment. Others suggest the arrival of new, aggressive groups from the east who overwhelmed them. There is also the possibility of internal social collapse, where their complex belief system and social structure could no longer withstand the pressures of a changing world. Whatever the cause, their legacy is written in the hidden chambers beneath the Ukrainian kurgans. They represent a fascinating and sophisticated branch of the steppe family tree, a people who took the Yamaya's mobile legacy and built upon it a more intricate and mysterious world for their dead, leaving behind stone sentinels and skulls bearing the marks of their faith as the only clues to their enigmatic story. And so our journey through the world's most puzzling burial sites brings us to its final, spectacular stop, not in a remote desert or a high mountain pass, but in the rolling Italian countryside just north of Rome. Here, spread across a tranquil plateau, lies the Banditaxia necropolis of Cerveteri, a sprawling and breathtakingly vivid city of the dead constructed by the enigmatic Etruscans. To walk among its streets and neighborhoods is an uncanny experience, for you are not wandering through ruins in the traditional sense. You are exploring a meticulously planned metropolis of tombs, with main thoroughfares, side streets, and distinct residential quarters, all designed for the eternal slumber of its inhabitants. The most iconic structures are the great tumuli, immense circular mounds built from packed earth and tufa stone, some measuring over 130 feet in diameter. These are not simple mounds of dirt, they are monumental, rock-cut houses for the dead, their exteriors often ringed with a carved stone base, making them look like colossal, domed dwellings rising from the earth. The effect is both majestic and deeply personal, a powerful statement that for the Etruscans, the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead was a porous one, and that the afterlife was a direct continuation of the domestic life they knew and cherished. The true wonder, however, is revealed when you step through the stone doorways and descend into the cool, dark interiors of these tombs. It is here that the Etruscan vision of eternity comes to life with stunning clarity. The rock walls are not left bare, they are meticulously carved to replicate the interiors of wealthy Etruscan homes. You find yourself in rooms with ceilings sculpted to look like the sturdy wooden beams of a grand hall. Stone beds or clini are carved directly from the living rock, often designed for two, awaiting the reclining figures of a married couple. Elaborate, high-backed thrones sit against walls, signaling the authority of the patriarch or matriarch. In some of the most ornate tombs, you can even see stone-carved shields, tools, and household utensils hanging in relief, as if the family had simply stepped out for a moment. This was not merely symbolic architecture, it was a profound act of faith. The Etruscans believed that the soul's journey required a familiar, comfortable environment, and by recreating the domestic sphere in such precise, enduring stone, they were providing their deceased with everything they would need for a prosperous and happy existence in the world beyond. The walls of many tombs were once alive with vibrant frescoes depicting scenes of feasting, dancing, athletic games, and serene landscapes, portraying an afterlife filled with joy, music, and banqueting, a far cry from the gloomy underworlds of other contemporary cultures. These tombs are, in fact, our single greatest window into the Etruscan world, and that is the central paradox of this civilization. The Etruscans were one of the most influential cultures in ancient Italy, dominating central Italy for centuries and profoundly shaping the early development of Rome, from its religious rituals to its engineering and architecture. Yet they remain one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, a people whose own voice has been largely silenced by time. The core of the mystery lies in their origins. The ancient historian Herodotus claimed they migrated from Lydia in Anatolia, a story that seemed to be supported by their distinct non-Indo-European language and certain cultural practices. Other writers, like Dionysius of Halicarnassus, argued they were an indigenous people who had developed uniquely in Italy. Modern DNA studies have only added fascinating layers to this debate, suggesting a complex picture that includes both significant local genetic continuity and input from the Near East, perhaps supporting a scenario where a small, influential group of Anatolian elites merged with the local population. We know the Etruscans called themselves the Racina, but we have no surviving Etruscan literature, no great historical chronicles written in their own hand. Their entire story must be pieced together almost exclusively from the silent testimony of their tombs and the often biased accounts written by their Greek rivals and Roman successors. This reliance on funerary art creates another layer of profound and intimate mystery. While we can see the vivid scenes of banquets and dancers on the tomb walls, we cannot fully grasp the specific spiritual meaning behind every gesture and symbol. The frescoes are not simply photographs of a party, they are dense with religious symbolism. What specific rites were the priests performing? What were the exact words of the prayers spoken as the dead were laid upon their stone beds? The tombs themselves are inscribed with the names of the deceased, but these are often just that, names. We know from inscriptions that Etruscan society granted women a remarkably high status compared to their Greek and Roman counterparts. Women retained their own names, could own property, and are depicted alongside their husbands at banquets, participating as equals. Yet the personal stories of these individuals, their triumphs and sorrows, the specific reasons they were deemed worthy of such an elaborate eternal home, are stories the stones keep to themselves. Were the families interred in the grandest tumuli powerful merchant clans who controlled trade across the Mediterranean? Were they priestly families who held the secrets of divination, a practice for which the Etruscans were famous, or were they warrior aristocrats who led servitories' armies? The artifacts found within exquisite gold jewelry, fine Greek pottery, bronze chariots speak of immense wealth and cosmopolitan tastes, but they cannot tell us the biography of the people who own them. The Banditaxia necropolis, therefore, stands as a magnificent and heartbreaking monument. It is a city built for eternity that preserves the shape of a life but not its breath. We can walk through its streets, enter its homes, and admire the artistry of a people who loved life so much they sought to replicate its comforts for the hereafter. We can see the echoes of their laughter in the dancing figures on the walls and sense their reverence for family in the stone beds carved for couples. But the living language that once filled these rooms, the names of the gods they invoked with such fervor, and the intimate family legends passed down through generations have all faded into an eternal silence. The Etruscans taught the Romans much of what they knew, and then they were absorbed, their culture fading and their language dying out. The tombs at Servitory are their ultimate legacy, a breathtaking, stone-carved echo of a vibrant, sophisticated, and mysterious people who built a city for their dead that has outlasted the memory of their own living voices, leaving us with a powerful, beautiful, and ultimately unanswerable question about the lives that once animated this silent city of stone. So, what do all these mysterious graves tell us? They remind us that history is not a solved puzzle but a living, breathing mystery, a conversation across millennia where we are constantly listening for whispers and often receiving only silence in return. Each of these 30 sites, from the rumored giants of Lovelock Cave to the deliberately erased tomb of Genghis Khan, is a stark reminder of the vast gaps in our collective memory. They are not merely footnotes, they are entire chapters ripped from the book of human experience, leaving behind empty spaces that challenge our most fundamental narratives. We look at a map of the ancient world and see empires and trade routes, but these enigmatic burials reveal the shadowy continents of the unknown, the cultures that rose and fell without leaving a written word, the powerful individuals whose names we will never speak again. They force a humbling realization that for every grand civilization we have chronicled, there might be another, completely different society whose story is buried just beneath our feet, waiting for a storm to shift the sand or a curious farmer to strike a strange stone with a plow. These sites actively push the very boundaries of archaeology, transforming it from a simple act of cataloging artifacts into a dynamic detective story that blends cutting-edge science with ancient legend. The Tarim Basin mummies were initially a bizarre anomaly, their Western features seemingly out of place until genetic sequencing rewrote the entire history of human migration in Central Asia. The silent stones of the Plain of Jars posed a simple question about their purpose, and the answer, emerging from painstaking excavation and isotopic analysis, revealed a complex, interconnected Iron Age society with sophisticated mortuary rituals. Every time a new technology emerges, like the ground-penetrating radar scanning the Mongolian steppe for Genghis Khan or the uranium series dating refining the timeline of the Laos jars, we gain a new lens through which to examine these old enigmas. Archaeology is not about having all the answers, it's about learning to ask better questions. These mysterious graves are the ultimate teachers, showing us that the past is not static. It is a constantly evolving narrative, reshaped with every new discovery, every decoded glyph, and every bone fragment analyzed for clues. Ultimately, this global collection of puzzles proves that the human past is far stranger, more diverse, and more wonderfully complex than we often allow ourselves to imagine in our neatly packaged textbooks. We tend to think in linear progressions, but the evidence from these graves shatters that simplicity. The peaceful trader priests of Carol built a monumental city without warfare or ostentatious royal tombs, while on the other side of the world, the rulers of Cahokia consolidated their power with terrifying public sacrifice. The Minoans of Crete created a society of such elegance and apparent joy, yet we cannot read a single word of their language or name a single one of their kings from their rich collective tombs. The stories we have uncovered are not variations on a single theme. They are entirely different compositions written in different keys with different instruments. They show us that there is no one way to be human, to wield power, to honor the dead, or to conceptualize the divine. The silent, patient testimony of these 30 graves invites us to embrace the wonder of not knowing, to find excitement in the unresolved, and to understand that the greatest stories ever told may still be lying in fragments, scattered across the earth, waiting for the right moment to be pieced together into a picture that will, once again, change everything we thought we knew. If the profound mysteries of these ancient resting places have sparked your imagination, then you definitely won't want to miss what's coming next. By subscribing to the channel and tapping that notification bell, you're securing your front row seat as we continue our deep dives into the world's greatest historical puzzles. We have countless more enigmas lined up, from lost cities swallowed by jungles to inexplicable artifacts that defy conventional timelines, and your support is what makes these journeys of discovery possible. Now we're incredibly eager to turn the microphone over to you. Looking back at the sites we've explored today, which one captured your mind the most? Was it the silent, toxic kingdom of China's first emperor, the strangely compelling ship burials of the Vikings, or the haunting, communal tombs of the Minoans? Let us know in the comments which civilization's secrets you're most desperate for us to investigate next. Should we venture into the deep Sahara to uncover the Garamontes, or perhaps sail to the megalithic ruins of Nan Madol? Your thoughts and curiosity are the compass for our future adventures. Thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration. Until our next journey into the unknown, keep questioning the past and never stop wondering about the incredible stories still waiting to be told.